Yeah.
High smoke point. So it's good for frying.
And we can either use it ourselves or steam the stir fry vegetables and give it to Wendy. That's why the good Lord gave us a Wendy.
Well, it might be time to
Which expired 3 years ago.
Well, it keeps longer if you keep it in the fridge. Just a few months ago.
Oh, okay. That hardly matters then.
But do we want to get rid of it and just start using the Southerner?
Sure.
Well, we don't dump it down the drain.
Okay, you figure out what to do with it. But dump it down in the compost bin. Yeah. The leaves and stuff will absorb it.
Better wait until there's more leaves then.
Yeah, okay, so when we do the compost, we'll dump it in.
I'll put it on the counter so we'll remember.
Creek. Starting to feel not completely unconscious.
Oh, you already put the berries up, right?
No, I haven't done anything yet. I just put things on the counter and went, duh. This bloody fucking can install. I know this page is only 50 pieces. I'm logged in. Just how stupid do you think I am? Okay. Come on, Kunioshis. My Kunioshi. Harmon. Kriegel. Okay. Yum. Hey, Jess. Woo! That's better. So where's the other Jeff? I'll make it a co-host. You're muted.
I'm at my father-in-law's house today. So
How far is that?
Menlo Park.
Okay, right close.
Marianne just was getting her brother. So she was quarantining and she just passed her COVID test this morning.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to be able to go home, but I'll go home after class. It's class time. Here we go. Join without video.
All right. Oh, mazel tov to Marianne.
Oh, thank you.
Elliot was telling me he has 2 grandchildren too young to be vaccinated, quarantining.
Let's see. And it doesn't seem to want to put me in gallery view on the phone. I think it's done different.
Yeah. The phones, I can't help you with the phone. I've never tried to do it on a phone.
You can hear me? Can you all hear me?
Hey, Dina.
I can, but can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Shavua tov. Oh, I have to change. I did change.
Can you hear me when I'm over here?
Just both. That's good.
Can you hear me over here?
Okay. And here, Michael and Michael. We're Rich and Michaels.
That's all.
What do I know?
Nina, do you know the song?
I know the people here on the Moss song.
So an appalling thought.
You know that song, Torahim. That's what I know works.
What about the Tapachai of the Moss song?
What do you say? Let's go back to sleep in Hebrew.
Holy shit. Daylight savings time is coming. Or I guess non-daylight savings time, whichever one it is, but I'll get an extra hour.
It's another.
All summer's wasted at Boy Scout.
Yeah.
Who the hell needs to know how to cook? I think it's hotels. So I have an organizational question. Other than those of you on islands in the Pacific, why is it the Wednesday, those of us who study on Wednesday almost all come in. Is it just Sunday morning or what's the effect?
For me, it's because I want to go to Sunday morning Minyan online first, which I would be unable to do in person. And I don't want to miss half of something.
Sure.
For me, it's earlier and just a little harder to get up and get going.
Jeff, what's your?
Jeff, you're muted.
You're muted.
Why do you keep muting yourself? You have such a beautiful voice.
You don't want to tell us, so you're muted.
I didn't think I muted. Somebody must have muted me. I have the same problem with morning minyan. The day is special in that I'm actually in Menlo Park at my father-in-law's house, so I probably couldn't come anyway. But in general, I would come, and I did come before. But it's very tricky to get here after morning minyan is over. There's less than 15 minutes.
Yeah, so it sounds like the depersonalization, the morning minyan depersonalization.
So if, for example, someone were to give one of us access to that room for on our key card, then some of us might be willing to go there and just daven in that room and do our morning minyan in that room, and then we would be there. That would be another possibility.
The key says no problem.
Okay, wait. I'm the Maradatra
Of the keys.
No, I'm not the Maradatra of the keys. But yeah, that seems logical to me. We've given access. You have access to this. We could easily give somebody access to this room and do that.
Yeah.
That's not a problem at all.
So that would be kind of what we need. That's what I think is the best way. Nina, would that work for you?
No, because it's too early for me and Jesse to get going.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to push, I'm just curious.
Hey, Laurie.
All right, well, it's nice to see everybody. Again, my intention,
No,
we're not. I'm taking advantage of.
No, I understand.
religious
I was
experience.
asking. No, I'm perfectly happy to break the law.
I mean, you're off.
We're off.
So a couple things. First of all, just in terms of schedule, my intention is I have an intro to Judaism class that starts this morning that will then go for the foreseeable future. So I'm happy to come in every Sunday. I'm going to come in anyway. I'm also finding like it's sort of smarter for me. This is my own problem. Like if I start my day, do my exercises, ignore my email until I actually come into the office, it's like better for me as a human being. So that's like a whole separate thing.
On any day.
On any day. So I'm happy to come in. So what I'm saying is we will meet here on Sundays. There will continue to support virtual. There will be in person. If you feel in the morning you want to show up, please feel most welcome. If you feel in the morning you want to show up with delicious baked goods or chocolate or really wonderful fruit from the farmer's market, those are all also excellent choices. Even if you want to invite us over to Hawaii, I mean, there are a lot of ways this can go, right? But in other words, we're here if you want to be here, okay?
But a key is available.
Y como mai.
I'll get a key.
Yeah. Jeff's key just has to be, Jeff, you just have to email Risa to get your key with another permission to come into this room. And
Okay, I can do that.
To the room.
And what is that room actually called?
Community
It's
room.
called the community room, but you need access to the vestibule door.
Vestibule door and
seems
community
to
room.
open them both.
I mean, the other thing I can do, Jeff, the truth is, I talk to Risa, I can open it from my bedroom. I have an app on my phone that lets me control all the stuff. So, I mean, I can program it to be open whether you have the access or not. So if people want to be here, like get the access on the key, but just let me know. I can also just program it to open. It's easy to do.
I'll get the access on the key. That's fine.
The only
That's the
reason I
obvious way to do it.
actually, my bedroom is a cell phone free zone.
Okay, I think I'll probably do this. I have a trip coming up in 2 weeks, so I don't think I'll get to it until after I get back, which will be close to Rosh Hashanah. So maybe in a few weeks we'll work it out.
And let me know if we get to a point where we're having a meaningful group here on Sunday morning. I'd love to join. When it's small, I'm enjoying my davening. Whatever, I get up, I daven, I exercise. It's kind of working for me as a routine. But if I'm helping to make a minyan or get close to the minyan, please let me know because that would split my schedule for me.
David, I have a request. Could you speak a little louder or get closer to the mic? I can hear you, but with some difficulty. Thank you.
Let me see if I can move the thing. I like sitting there just because I think it's better on the camera, but let me see if I can move the.
Okay, that'd be great.
Laurie, you're about to be devoured by a giant flower.
Camera loves you. Just keep the flower off.
Living on the brink, taking some risks.
Oh my!
Worry that
It's about the same, but it's okay. I can straighten. That'd be great. Okay,
So,
that's better.
first of all, our bracha. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kishana v'nechashah v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. Praised are you, God, ruler of all, who makes us holy with your commandments and invites us into busying ourselves with Torah. So we are finishing up some material about Ruth. And I was really sorry, John, that you missed it last week, because I know you love the book of Ruth.
It did, yeah.
Yeah, so let's actually start.
The board. Was it a board meeting?
You were at a board meeting.
Yeah, right over there. Was it? Yeah.
Okay, let's not go there. So let's start 91B2. We actually did a piece of this, but both out of kavod for John and just to kind of keep our place, I'd like to actually start at the beginning of the page.
Page, please.
91B2.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first thing they're talking about is this thing about their names. So again, I just draw your attention, right? The names Machlon Ukilion.
Is this B1 or is this B2? I don't have the 1 and 2
B1.
division.
B2. I'm sorry, I misspoke. B2.
I know I don't have the distinction between the 1 and the 2 easily done. Where are you starting? I'm sorry.
Ketiv, it is written in the book of Ruth that Elimelech's two sons.
Right
were
there.
Kilion.
Got it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So of course, just keep in mind from the book of Ruth itself, the names are a little insulting, right? Machlon, it's like illness and what's the way?
Destruction.
Like empty.
Wiped out.
Yeah, it's like disease and wiped out
But
one.
it's metaphorical. It's predictive and metaphorical.
Correct, but I'm just saying, they're predictive names, but they're also, I mean, in other words, you would, although we were talking about this a couple weeks ago, I guess it was a Protestant custom. I think you even said to name children horrible things as an act of humility.
That's
I
not
said.
Who said that?
I said.
So
It was a Puritan custom.
It's a Puritan custom.
Yeah.
No,
But
it's
there's
funny.
no reason to think those were retrojected Puritans.
Well, no, it's just funny. John's right. Carol has a similar reaction. Carol grew up as a Presbyterian. And so sometimes she gets into these like Catholic Protestant debates and she has a partisan reaction because she grew up in this one way.
Say to her, get over it, Carol.
It's just funny. We're at we're at Jerusalem and I'm like, I don't know which the Christian sites are. Can you point these things out to people? She's like, sure. So we're like on this balcony. She's like, well, here's where this happened, whatever. And we believe this. And I'm like, what do you mean we? It was hysterical.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I mean,
So John was being partisan Catholic.
I don't think anybody ever accused the Puritans of being a reasonable Christian sect. They certainly were a popular Christian sect for a while.
Let us not judge.
Reasonable.
Yeah.
Charles.
I don't think they considered themselves to be reasonable.
For sure.
All right.
I
So
think
anyway,
they thought it was an evil.
we have these either predictive, insulting, whatever you call them, these are unpleasant names, that's for sure. So they say their names are Machlono Kilion, Uktiv, but in Chronicles they're called something else, Yoash the Saraf. So what's the deal there? So Rav Shmuel Amar, so they try to figure out a way of dealing with this. Chad Amar Machlono Kilion Shma. One said, actually, the truth is their names really were Machlono Kilion, the Lamanik Rashman Yoash the Saraf. Why did they call them, like why did they have nicknames, if you will, Yoash and Saraf? Yoash, Sheni Yaashu min Ha'geula. Yoash is because they abandoned hope of redemption. Now, I would just draw your attention to this for a minute because this is another evidence that Ben Gurion knew his Talmud. Okay, when Ben Gurion and others were involved in writing the Gillat HaAtzmaut, they referenced the idea of Yeush, that people never gave up hope of being restored to the land. So I'm not saying it's a reference to this specific Talmud, but I mean, he knew the principle of Yeush, he understood what that was about with lost property, and it really does echo this material right here. Saraf, so he's called Yoash because they gave up on redemption. They left the land, they abandoned everyone. Saraf, Shenit Chayvus Refala Makom. Saraf, because they became deserving before the omnipresent of death by burning, right? Because they were such bad people.
That is not improvement from the other names.
It's like the initial names weren't bad enough.
Plague and despair, destruction and burning. Cherry names.
Exactly. Though Yoash, I mean, whatever. Yoash.
Why did they think that this was? I mean, it seems constructed. Why did they think this was an important construction? Maybe to connect the two verses, to connect the two versions.
Right. They want to understand that what they're trying to do is, so the book of Ruth sits sort of outside the rest of the biblical corpus historically, like it identifies itself in sort of mythic time. So they're trying to, in the Chronicles material, they want to say these were the people that we're talking about in Chronicles.
I see.
So then it sort of fits it into Jewish history, as it were.
It's sort of like the story of Robin Hood referencing specific kings that were known to. Okay.
Exactly. Or it's actually the other way around. Like it's like saying, well, Robin Hood was really, this guy who's mentioned over here and, whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so then the Chanamar said, Yoash v'Saraf, their real names were actually Yoash and Saraf, the Lamanik Rashman Machlonu Kilion. Why were they called Machlon and Kilion? Machlon she'asa gufo chuli. Machlon because they made their bodies profane, right? They did all sorts of terrible things. They went out of Israel and they became tameh. The Kilion shenitchayvu kiliyah lemakom, and Kilion because they became deserving before the omnipresent of destruction. So the midrash here, and it fits the category of what we've been looking at, is like, don't leave Israel. We know it's really hard. We get it that the economy is not so hot right now. We're asking you to have faith and to stick it out and stay in.
And yet this is exactly what the patriarchs did. This is exactly what they did.
Well, Abraham, so if you think about the Haggadah, right, they're trying to distinguish Abraham from other such behaviors. So when they say Abraham went down to Egypt, it was meant as a temporary thing.
Should we discuss Jacob?
And
Yeah.
then Isaac never leaves.
Never leaves, right?
Right? And right, I mean, Jacob is also problematic from this perspective, but ultimately comes back. So Machlon and Kilion seem to leave and don't return. And Jacob has, let's say, extenuating circumstances, right? Like he thinks he'll get killed if he stays. He believes his brother Esau will murder.
Haggadah never mentions
Yitzchak. That's an
He's
interesting
clearly
spin.
terrified.
I've never heard that spin.
No, I mean, he says as he leaves, and then when he comes back, he's clearly terrified of Esau and his 400.
I understand, but time passes.
I mean, you're right. There's other patriarchs, but this drash is serving a political purpose. So,
I'm just pointing out occasional inconsistency.
yes, you're
Yeah,
right.
but it's written by people who are themselves in Babylon. And how did we switch to this context anyhow? I mean,
Wait, why
how
do you
did,
think that these are written by people in Babylon?
It's the Bavli.
This is,
But this is a Baraita, which I'm identifying as coming from Eretz Yisrael because this is Rabbi Yochanan. So I
Oh.
think this is a source from the Galilean community in the 3rd or 4th century when things are still, there's still life there, but they're having a lot of challenges. That's where I'm identifying that as struggle. I may be wrong, but that's.
Okay, but we're not to the Baraita yet. If you'd only gotten this far in the text, you'd think it was just Rav and Shmuel.
yeah.
Right, but the previous material, but the previous material is from Rabbi Yochanan. So I mean, I guess you're right. Rav and Shmuel, you're right. I withdraw the comment. Rav and Shmuel are the ones who are trying to make sense of this. So they themselves seem to be identifying a very kind of proto-Zionist or religious Zionist, not in our modern term, mode to this, even though they choose to live in Babel.
Can I put in something I just realized about the Haggadah? It references Abraham and Yaakov, the ones who left the land. It never refers to Yitzchak, the one who stayed in the land. And this is peculiar because the Haggadah was actually written in Eretz Yisrael, right? But it only references the ones who left, even though it doesn't talk about Abraham.
Well, I mean, again, and it's maybe a similar thing that's going on with Rav and Shmuel here. It's one thing to leave, it's another thing to permanently leave. So we're interested in talking to a community that feels like it doesn't have a place anymore in Eretz Yisrael and may have to leave, but we're saying like, that one bit of like Lagur Sham, they went just for a temporary time.
Yeah.
So saying like, fine, we know you got to leave, but don't put down roots. Please don't buy property in Palo Alto. Like, don't have 3 children, in the Bay Area. You know what I'm saying? Like Carol and I have deep roots in the United States. My family's here, my children are here. If all 3 of my kids made Aliyah, like we'd follow them for sure. But if only one of them even were to make Aliyah, if all 3 of them stay here, it's just very unlikely. Not because we hate Israel, but just because we actually live here. You know what I mean? So that's what they're kind of warning against. Don't put those kind of roots down.
So the Haggadah was also written for people who were, even though they might be in Eretz Yisrael, were not necessarily able to or intending to stay there.
Yeah, it's at a time of tremendous instability where people are leaving and they're trying to, what you want to say to somebody who's leaving is, we know you have to go and we still love you, but come back.
The Haggadah, it's if you're talking the Pesach Haggadah, I believe many sections were done medieval by Jews in Europe.
Yeah, I'm referring specifically to the Kamosha Amar Midrashic material.
Yeah.
Where it talks about Lagur Sham, right? When you went to live there, they're saying to live but not to settle, right? They're trying to make a distinction between gur to
Right. No, all I was referring to is whether this was actually done in Israel or done already in Europe. I don't know that.
The sections that
But the people Nina's commenter who's asked that this is being said by Bavliim, by Persians, is a great point, right? This is a self-reflection by people living out of Eretz Yisrael, who are part of a community that's been out of Eretz Yisrael for a long time, from the first temple era, and they're still having this kind of proto-Zionism. So that's actually very interesting.
And picking on these 2 is interesting because we can certainly say in terms of return that Abraham's seed does return.
Right.
Jacob's seed does return.
Right.
This seed goes nowhere.
Right.
Ruth does not carry the seed.
Right.
So this
Right,
truly
this is a dead end.
This truly is
Becomes a dead end, yeah. All right. Tanya Kimanda Amar Machlon Kilyon Shema. So a Braita has been taught in accord with the view that Machlon and Kilyon were their true names. De Tanya, for we have a Braita, my dichti, what does it mean? Vayokim va'anshe kozeva v'yosh v'saraf asher ba'alu lema v'yashvu lechem hadvarim atikim. And Yokim and the dwellers of Chozeba, and Yoash and Sarah, who cohabitated unto Moab, and Yeshuvu Lechem. Now these are ancient matters, right? You can see, especially with the comment of Moab, why this text from Chronicles seems like a nice place to stick the book of Ruth. Okay, but keep in mind this is totally drosh, right? There's no, the Chronicles is just giving a genealogy. Vayokim ze Yoshua. Yokim means Joshua. Shehikim shva la'anshe Givon, who upheld an oath to the dwellers of Givon. We talked about that last time, right? The Givonites were among the Canaanite tribes. In order to avoid being totally destroyed, they go to Yehoshua, what do you call it? Why am I blanking on my English? Disguised as some faraway tribe. And they say, oh, please take us in and let us be your water drawers. And Joshua's fine. And then it turns out they're Gibeonites. And he nevertheless maintains the oath that he promised to preserve them. So Anshe Kozeba, right, the dwellers of Kozeba, and they're picking on the way Kozev, meaning like a lie, Elo Anshe Givon. These are the dwellers, these are the people of Givon, Shekizvu Yoshua, who lied to Joshua. Vayoash v'Saraf, Ela Machlonu Kilyon. Who are Yoash and Saraf? They're Machlon and Kilyon. Amanik Rashman Yoash v'Saraf, and why were they called by the names Yoash and Saraf? Yoash Shinit Yashumin Agulah, but this is just repeating, this is the support for the one position. Yoash, because they abandoned hope of redemption. Saraf, Shinit Chayvu, Sreifa Lamakom. Saraf, because they became deserving before the omnipresent of death. Then it goes on. Asher Ba'alu Moab, who cohabitated unto Moab. Shenasu Nashim Moabiyot. They married Moabite women, meaning Ruth and Orpah. Vayashuvu Lechem, and they returned, right? The Yashuvu Lechem, they returned to Lechem. Zorut HaMoaviyah. This is specifically a reference to Ruth. Sheshavu v'nidbaka b'Beit Lechem Yudah, who returned and attached herself to Beit Lechem of Judah. By the way, the word davak, clinging, appears repeatedly in the book of Ruth.
Mhm.
And so Ruth is sticky.
Mhm.
You know, she clings. And there's both a quality of it that has a sort of unseemliness and a part that's very seemly, right? So she maybe lacks ego boundaries that some people do. And there's a sense with sticky stuff where you want to wipe it off, but at the same time you want to cling too. So there's an ambiguity here. But
She's got a green dot on her name tag.
She has a green dot on her name tag. That is correct. The hadvarim atikim, these are ancient matters. Dvarim halalu atik yomini amran. These matters were decreed by the Ancient of Days, meaning God. Meaning it was decreed. In other words, this is sort of an anti-free choice thing. God said in motion that Machlon and Kilyon would mess this up, would do this terrible thing, but it served a purpose of redemption. So that means, this is another way of saying it's similar in the book of Esther, right? Where Mordecai says to Esther, if you don't take this on, you'll be wiped out, but somebody else will take it on. So it's similar, right? Like Machlon and Kilyon had to do their thing. So if you're going to leave Eretz Yisrael and you're going to put down roots in Palo Alto and you're going to buy a home and you're going to have children or whatever, it might be a dead end for you, but it will still have a redemptive quality in some fashion that you can't even see.
Joseph is the same.
Yeah, right. There's another, right, same idea. The brother sent him down to Egypt and it serves a divine purpose. So you can't get out of the web even if you think you're pulling yourself out.
So why try?
What?
So why try?
Say it, why try? Sure. I think that is a part of the drugs. Like, in other words, yeah, can someone let in Sam, by the way? Nina, can you?
Oh, sorry.
So why should I bother?
Well, the other all is foreordained, so why bother? It is in this midrash though, right?
Yeah.
But that's foreordained that you will bother.
I am that philosophy.
Me neither. No, me neither. I mean, look, again, I think this is a drosh that's serving a political purpose. So it's trying to encourage people, and it's a little bit, I'm thinking about for the holidays of talking a little bit about anti-Semitism, and one of the thoughts that comes to my mind is, one thing we're going through in America now is the Jews want to distinguish themselves from Israel and from the politics of Israel. And while we want to maybe do that internally, I'm not sure the non-Jewish world is prepared to play.
Well, they're prepared to play.
Well, no, I mean, they're not going to say, like, we can say all we want, I don't support Israel, I don't believe in the politics of Israel. I don't think the non-Jewish world, like, so one reaction is say, You can think but you're not real, you're still in. You're still going to be judged for it no matter what you think. That may be true or not true, but that serves a political purpose to say that. Okay, weiter. I'm not trying to convince, I may try to convince you at Rosh Hashanah. Now I'm just talking. Hema hayotzrim v'yoshvei neta'im ugdera. So now continuing on with the Chronicles passage, they were potters, dwellers by the saplings and the fences. Im hamelech, so they want that whole passage to be talking about Ruth. Im hamelech b'malchato.
No, I think you skipped one line. Right?
Yeah.
You did.
You
Oh,
did
yeah.
actually skip the last
Thank
line,
you,
yeah.
thank you.
The one
You're right.
Matsati and Nimsa.
Yeah, so dichtiv, as it is written, Matsati David Avdi, I found David my servant, uktiv shtei benotecha hamimsaot, your two daughters who were found with you, right? So and just right, if you look down at the note, and I think you can pull it up, right? Just as dawn was breaking, the angels urged Lot on, saying, "Get up, take your wife and your two daughters who are found with you, lest you be swept away because of the sin of the city." The oldest of these daughters became the forebear of the Moabite nation, and thus of Ruth and King David, Ruth's great grandson. So what the Gemara is saying here is that God's hand was at work preparing the Davidic dynasty centuries before its emergence, right? So first he sets up with Lot's daughters to have Moab, and then he sets up with Maklon and Kilion. So to your point about predestination, this is like, it's really a whole complex web, and God is pulling the strings at every point.
Especially because some documentary interpreters see the event of Lot and his daughters as an insult to Moab, right? That you are the descendants of incest.
That's right.
It's an insult, and this turns it around.
Yeah, and this preserves the overall force, I think, of the book of Ruth, which is to, in some ways, defend the Moabites in particular. But I think it's a book that, in some ways, paradoxically argues against a rigid idea of chosenness, right? Where she's able to let go of her being a Moabite, like that becomes irrelevant to her. She's just Ruth. And the Moabites, who are these people you're not supposed to marry or cohabit, like they've become central to the Davidic dynasty. So there is a quality that's certainly pro-conversion, but arguably creating a tension around the idea of chosenness, right? Because the flip side is she's the mother of King David. So it's like, and she comes back to Israel. I mean, it's invested in the centrality of Israel with Davidic dynasty. All right, so now I believe I'm in the next place. Hema hayotzrim v'yoshvim na'te'em ugdera. They were the potters, dwellers by the saplings and the fences. Im hamelech b'malchato yeshu sham. With the king at his work, they sat there. The Baraita expands, Hema hayotzrim, Ela b'nei Yonadav ben Rechav. They were the potters. This refers to the sons of Yonadav, the son of Rechav. Shenatzru shrot avihem, who heeded, turn the page please, the oath of their father. So take a look at note 29 just to get the historical background. The family of Yonadav, son of Rechav, had been prominent in the years preceding the destruction of the first temple. Jeremiah records how the prophet had been told by God to collect the family members, bring them to the temple, and offer them wine. They refused, telling Jeremiah that their father had commanded them to drink no wine, build no houses, sow no fields, nor plant any vineyards, but to live a life of complete simplicity and tents. This, as Sifrei Bahalotacha teaches, was because, knowing that it had already been decreed the temple was destroyed, Yonadav felt as if it has already been destroyed. The sensitivity of Yonadav and the obedience to his wishes displayed by his children were held up by Jeremiah as a rebuke to the people. God was their father, and they paid him less heed than the Rechavites had paid their father. Okay? So Yoshvei Neta'im, now we continue with this. Zeh Shlomo, so dwellers by the sapling, what's that really talking about? It means King Solomon. Shedomel and Nitiyah b'malchuto, who was comparable to a flourishing sapling in his kingship. In other words, he was a terrific king. Ugdera, zo Sanhedrin, and fences, that of course is referring to the Sanhedrin. Shegadru pirtzotehen shel Yisrael, who fenced in the breaches of the Jewish people. I hope you hear, even in the word Sanhedrin, the ahistoricism of this. Right, the idea that, right, the word Sanhedrin is obviously a Greek word. The idea that Solomon had a Sanhedrin is a little ahistorical, it seems to me. Shegadru pirtzotehen shel Yisrael, they fenced in the breaches of the Jewish people. Im hamelech b'malchuto yashvu sham. Now we get something great. This is the part of the Midrash I love. With the king at his work, they sat there. What does it mean? They, the plain meaning of the text is that Bathsheba sat there with Solomon, right? The mother of Solomon was with him. But they say because it's a plural, Yashvu, Zu Rot HaMoaviyah. Ruth lived to this moment. Shira'ata b'malchut Shlomo b'beno shel bana. She lived to see the son of Solomon, the grandson of her grandson. Shne'amar vayasem kisei le'ema melech Solomon placed a seat for the mother of the king, the Amar Rabbi Elazar. And who is that? Le'ima shel malchut. It's the mother of the whole royal line, meaning Ruth. Right? So Ruth HaMoaviyah sits at the moment of the flourishing of Jewish kingship. And by the way, there's a midrash elsewhere that says the moment where she dies is a moment of incredible fulfillment. It's when she sees Solomon with the woman who comes with the baby, and the whole thing, cut the baby in half, and then the true mother steps forward. Right? She sees the flourishing of Solomon's wisdom. She lives to see the flourishing of his wisdom, and that's the moment where she dies. Right? Elderly, fulfilled, having seen a great king emerge in Israel. Yeah.
So I don't know how much the group wants to tolerate responses here,
Sure.
but this is starting to feel a lot like this is starting to feel a lot like the cultish presentation of Mary as the queen sitting on the right hand of the king.
Sure.
These are very much in harmony, harmonic resonance of the same thing.
Well,
How far are they going to go with this?
I mean, they're pretty done now.
Okay.
But what I would say is it's the other way around, right? I mean, in other words, Christianity, which is also an interpretive tradition of the same Bible, when it's developing, I mean, they also know these midrashim.
Yeah, this is not an unfamiliar path, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, right, they take it a step further. I mean, we sort of stop, as it were.
Baruch Hashem.
Right. And they use it. I mean, it's the same thing with Isaac at the sacrifice.
We all know about that, but this is much more subtle. This is interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a
So
beautiful.
sorry.
No, it's great.
For what's worth.
Aviva Zornberg writes, Lori, have you ever studied with Aviva Zornberg on the Book of Ruth?
Oh, I bet that's great.
She's beautiful on it, but she talks about, she really picks up, she concludes.
Has she written a book on the Book of Ruth?
She has a chapter, in one of her books, she has a chapter on the Book of Ruth.
I'm gonna have to look that up. So I like Zornberg.
Yeah, she concludes with this passage of kind of, the moment of the outcast and the Moabite, and then she becomes the mother of kingship, and sort of there's this incredible kind of fulfillment of self in this moment. And it's, it's very beautiful.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
All right, 91b3, continuing. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, well, V'achaltem min hatua yashan. The verse says, you will eat of the crop, the old. What does it mean, the old? Below salmonton. That means the 6 years crop will be free of salminton, whatever that is. My below salminton. What does free of salminton mean? Rav Nachman Amar, Rav Nachman said, below ritzinta, free of ritzinta, which is some kind of worm that infests grain and causes it to rot. Rav Sheshet Amar, below shidefa, free of decay, which causes the grain to spoil. So, it's going to be free of something yet. Tanya Kapte de Rav Sheshet. We have a Baraita according to the view of Rav Sheshet. Tanya Kapte de Rav Nachman. And similarly, a Baraita according to the view of Rav Nachman. Right? Meaning it could either be salmonton or ritzita. Tanya Kapte de Rav Nachman. If you follow the view of Rav Nachman, it goes like this. V'achaltem yashan. And you will eat the old until the 9th year, until the arrival of its crop. Right? This is talking about the sabbatical. Yachol Yehu Yisrael Mitzakim L'chadash Mipnei Yashan Shekala. It might be supposed that the people of Israel will be looking forward to the new crop at the beginning of the 9th year, because the old one will have been destroyed due to Ritzinta infestation. Talmud Lomar, the Torah therefore states, Ad bo tuvuata, until its crop arrives, you'll eat the old. Ad shedevo tuva me'elaha, until the crop comes on its own. Right, meaning it won't have this rot stuff that will eat it away. Tanya Kapti Rav Sheshet. And according to Rav Sheshet, V'achaltem min hatzua yashan, you'll eat of the crop the old. Yachol Yehu Yisrael mitzapim lachadash mipnei yashan shara. It might be supposed that the people of Israel will be looking forward to the new crop because the old one will have turned bad due to decay. Talmud Lomar ad bo tavuata ad shetavo tavua me'alaha, until the crop comes on its own. Right. So one is that like it won't grow, it will be totally destroyed, and the other is it will have an infestation. And then a braided Belaita, Tanu Rabbanan, V'achaltem Yashan Noshan, eat the old, the very old produce, Melamed, Shekol HaMiyushan Mechaviro. This teaches that whatever is more aged than its counterpart, Have Yafeh Mechaviro, is superior to its counterpart. Right? They're all good burgundies. However, as I know, it only applies to things that it is customary to age, right? I don't know if I don't want to be ridiculous with this, right? But whites are not a good idea to leave in your cellar forever. Dvarim she'ein darkan liyashnan minayin. How do I know that it applies even to things that it is not customary to age? Talmud Lomar, the Torah there states an amplification, Yashan Noshan, old, very old. Mikol Makom. This teaches that aging will be beneficial in the year of the sabbatical, right? Although there'll be a special quality here of sabbatical that things that normally don't age will. Mikol Makom. V'yashan ibnei chadash tutziu, and it says you'll remove the old to make way for the new. Melamed shayu otsarot malein yashan. Excuse me. This teaches that the storehouses were full of old grain. Ugranot malein chadash, and the threshing floors were full of new grain. Vayu Yisrael omrim heach notzi zeh mipnei zeh. How will we take out this to make room for this? Right. In other words, there's such an overflowing of wealth they didn't even know what to do with it. Amar Rav Papa, kol milei atika ma'alia. All things that are aged are better. Lavar me tamra v'shikra charsina, except for dates, beer, and small fish. So
The bar food of the day. There's a little bowl of dates and a little bowl of small fish.
I mean, Sam is fond of saying, you know, the Gemara has part of its purpose is to teach us a little bit folk wisdom. And, you know, it sort of adds, they can't like resist, like here's a little thing just to be aware of. So I just want to say this about the conclusion of this parak, and then we'll go on. And I think, yeah, definitely.
But dates age well.
Yeah, I was, and chica as well, and like beer as well, right?
Well, beer will spoil over time.
Yeah.
Not like wine, right?
Oh,
I want to drink fresh beer.
They didn't have refrigeration.
Yeah, your beer.
But dates, you dry dates, they last for a long time.
You are right.
Maybe Ralph Papa didn't like dried dates.
Really?
David, do you think this is an example of a drash that you could give in the synagogue for respecting old folks?
Yafeh. Sure. Right. I mean, there's a sense, yeah. But look, okay, here's the thing I want to say.
Well, except for those of us who are small fish.
We're small fish.
Small fish, yeah. The old folks who are small fish, we don't get better.
Yeah, that would be a problem. Okay, but look, here's the thing I want to point out, okay? So we've been dealing with a lot of property rights and a lot of questions of ownership and land ownership and who owns what. That brought us into a discussion of how do we want to make good on the theology of Amos? Remember, that's how we got into this, right? And into this particular set of material. And we came up with first specific practices and behaviors, and then it led us in a kind of proto-Zionist direction. So again, I don't want to overstate it, right? I'm not saying it's the Zionism of Ben Gurion and Jabotinsky and all those guys, but it's a kind of proto-Zionism, meaning we are yearning to be back in the land, and we believe that we can fulfill Amos's requirements of ethical behavior. Maybe that will get God to bring us back. So we kind of end here on this praise and this luxuriating in the history of Eretz Yisrael, in the promises of Geulah. Don't be like Machlon and Yoash and give up on the possibility. And by the way, look at how Ruth, who lived through such poverty and degradation, look what happened to her. And we're living where we are, but we may yet find ourselves in a time where we go back to Israel and there's so much old grain that there's not even room for the new grain. Right? We could end up having a country that has one of the highest GNPs in the Western world, and we wouldn't even know what to do with ourselves.
But they're not talking about sovereignty. They're talking about occupation and residency.
That is correct.
I don't feel a sovereignty, which is Zionism is all about sovereignty.
No, that's fair. They're talking.
Or is that the difference? That's the difference.
Yeah, I mean, elsewhere, I do think they're talking about sovereignty. Here, this is more hopeful, imaginative.
Okay.
So it's less. I think it's less rooted in a political reality. But obviously, as soon as you bring up David and Solomon, you're not talking about sovereignty.
Yeah, exactly.
Sovereignty.
Yeah.
So sovereignty is assumed, I
Two
believe.
plus questions. One is, do you really think the editors, the stuff you put together, Baba Batra just described it?
Yes.
Okay. Good.
And I do think this set of name roads 100%. But I think the fact that it's at the end of this chapter and it's midway through Baba Batra is no coincidence. You know,
I have a question now.
just give Alan one more second.
But another plus question, as they spin these tales, are they saying, speaking metaphorically to themselves, or are they saying, speaking metaphorically, as, of course, let's think about, or do you think they literally believe it's Sanhedrin.
So look, as you know, I sit in a particular school of thought on Talmudic scholarship, which is not true of everyone, right? I do believe there's a lot of theology and intention in the structure of the text. There are definitely some who think it's a more random amalgamation of sources. B, in terms of the second thing that you're asking, I mean, I feel like it's difficult to know the playfulness, but yes, I think they're aware of these as literary constructions. Meaning, I think they know that they're writing material that's fantastical, which is different than saying fictional.
Right.
I sometimes talked about before, like that, that third space.
Myth is not fiction.
Myth is not fictional, right? But myth is also not true in the sense that a history is true. Or in other words, they don't think that they are writing, a biography of or whatever, right?
But myth is true.
Yeah, they're in this in-between space where they're taking real things, but they're being playful in a way that's different than, when I write the next Marvel
And are they
superhero.
writing for Amcha, right? Are they writing stuff that will help people when they go home? They say to their wives, of course.
No, actually, I think the Talmud is writing for rabbis, meaning I think this is originally written for an elite group. And it's meant, Michael, to your point, maybe I should give a drush about, elder members of the congregation. It's meant actually to inspire that, right? They want me, meaning they want, if you'll forgive me for a minute, right? They want the learned rabbinic elite of the community to see this stuff and then draw inspiration from it and take it in relevant directions. I don't need to set myself up in there, right? That's the, okay. Any other thoughts as we move on to chapter 6?
Yeah, actually, just to amplify what you said, I think there is this counter explanation of Yashan Mipnei Chadash Tutziu. It's not that you are taking out the Yashan, it's actually you're taking out the Chadash. So Yashan is more sacred than Chadash. That's like Me'arsayich u'machrivaich mimech yetzeu. There is the counter explanation. No. Those are coming from you. They're not leaving you. So Yashan Mipnei Chadash is all about making the Yashan more important and to be sanctified and adored and everything.
I love it. No, so think of the song we like at Kol Hamet. I mean, it's other places sing it, of course, but our high holiday, right, is Chadesh Yameinu Kikedet.
Exactly.
Right, renew our days as of old, meaning there's something of the old really that we want to bring into the new.
And apropos of the comment earlier about resonances from Christianity, I think, again, the Yashan Mipnei Chadash, right, that we should retain.
Oh, very good.
That was fabulous. In other words, we're the Yashan, right? If the older is more, like, don't make a second. That's very, very nice, Dean. I didn't see that at all. You don't want a New Testament. The old one's the good one.
Yeah,
Right? The
very
new,
good.
right?
That's a story. Why?
It's also
So I
the
picked it up in the text in a way I didn't see. That was yesterday.
Nice.
really strong message about bringing converts into Judaism. And that actually did take off, in fact, even more so on the Christian side. And so the very act of accepting Ruth as Jewish, and that the Davidic line comes from Ruth, is in just at that one point is the beginning of a line of philosophy that leads to our whole Western civilization.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and Jews are never going to compete well on the conversion structure because we are too demanding.
Well, you have to participate to compete. Based on my experience, conversion enthusiasm is non-participation of the Jewish community.
Only people who are born Jewish can actually just go and sleep in on Shabbat.
Fair enough. Look, I mean, I do dedicate a meaningful percentage of my rabbinic life to conversion. But what I'm saying is, I ask people to study with me for 10 months. If they're uncircumcised, they have to go, have skin removed from their penis. They need to come to shul. They need to learn Hebrew. I mean, that's nuts, right? The Mormons are like, I don't know, come pray with us once or twice and we'll take you in. I mean, it's really crazy. And I'm amazed by the sincerity of my converts, but it's hard to imagine it becoming a huge mass movement because it's really demanding.
David, if I may ask you to refresh our mind, if my memory serves me right, there was a pretty serious numbers and movements towards conversion, let's say in the 1st century BCE and the 1st century ACE, And the Romans got really pretty concerned about it, and they stopped it. I mean, can you say a few more words about it? Is my memory correct?
The Romans were worried about it. They didn't necessarily stop it. Part of what happened is Christianity, I would say, as Christianity was emerging, it created another, clearly there was something appealing in the time about monotheism. And people were drawn to Judaism, but then Christianity, it's the second market phenomenon. Right? Christianity sort of saw, or as it's developing, Pauline Christianity offered a way to come to monotheism that was much easier.
Mm.
You can even see in the Acts of the Apostles where they are crafting the brand.
Right.
Saying, this is a barrier to sale. This is a barrier to sale. I just had a vision. I can remove this barrier to sale.
Right. So they make it, yeah, exactly. So they make it easier. Now, then it's the Christians who start banning conversion to Judaism. And like
That was the beginning of all marketing that we do today.
But it was, the laws of kashrut were a barrier to sale.
Oh my gosh, there's a long history of Jews being terrible marketers.
And very good ones too. But Rabbi, I think the big difference is there's this bumper sticker that the Masonic Lodge puts out. It says to be one, ask one. And it means that Masons never ask people to join, have to join. And that's Judaism. Nobody ever asks you. You have to ask.
Right.
That's a big difference.
It's a big burden. All right, so let's go on to chapter 6. We're now halfway through Baba Batra, which I don't know, feels like a modern achievement.
Yeah.
And I would feel good about us as a group. There are not many people in the universe who want to sit and go through the entirety of a Masechet of Talmud. Thank you, Dina, for the graphic. And like really read each word of it and sort of wrestle with the stuff that's immediately fascinating and intriguing, and to sit with pieces. I feel like I get a more whole picture by doing all of this with you. Like there's something that's gained, even though some moments are really exciting and fun, some moments are like a little bit of a slog, but I get the wholeness of it, and it brings something to me in a way that cherry picking I don't get. So that overall, I find this class much more fulfilling than when I do like a best of kind of a class. And I'm grateful for you wanting to do this. There just aren't a lot of people who want to do it.
Let's say 200,000.
Okay, that's not a lot of people. There's like what, 7 billion people in the world?
Yeah. 200,000.
And if you exclude the Orthodox, how many non-Orthodox people are willing to play like this? The numbers are small.
And there's a few non-Jews in Japan. Yeah.
Did you know there's the Talmud Hotel in Taiwan? I kid you not, look it up. There's the Talmud Hotel in Taiwan, which is organized, it claims, according to Jewish business principles. It's red because the Talmud says it should be red. And you can actually, and there's books in it where you can pick up like on Jewish business practices from the Talmud. It's hysterical. I'm dying to stay there now.
Wow.
They don't know any Jew, they don't know anything from Jews. They don't know about Jews. They don't know, it's just the Talmud Hotel. It's very weird.
If you're on it. It's very
All right. Yeah. Well, Jeff, maybe at the end of class, you'll put it up on the monitor.
Maybe
right.
it's for the Korean businessmen.
I told you before, we're hoping to be in Korea for some sabbatical time, and I'm really wanting to find a Talmud booth there.
I wish to testify, he did not make it up.
I did not make it up. Correct. No, if I want to make something up, I'm going to make it a lot harder to search on Google.
Brother Alan, testing.
All right. Amen. HaMocher perot l'chaviro, chapter 6. If one sells produce to his fellow without specifying whether he's selling it whether he's selling it for planting or eating, right? So now we're going back from the Midrashim, we're turning back to the legal of the Gemara, of the Mishnah. Uzra'an, and then the buyer planted it, velot samchu, but it didn't grow. Vafilu zera pishtan, even if it was flaxseed, which is usually purchased for planting, eno chayav ba'achrayotam. The seller is not responsible for its loss, right? So this is a limitation, right? If you buy something and you don't know what it's for and it doesn't grow, too bad for you. Rabbi Shimon.
Does this give a Jewish opinion to the recombinant DNA seeds, where people have taken these seeds and planted them, and then the manufacturers have said, well, you signed an agreement that you wouldn't plant them. Or like the adjacent field has saplings of seeds that flew over from the genetically modified grain, and so then the guy next door, he starts selling them, and they say, well, this is my product, you're stealing my product. And he said, well, I didn't do anything, I just harvested.
Interesting.
No, but see, if we just,
Anyway.
first paragraph, without going into the second, there's a very strong statement. It says, if you buy a seed and it doesn't grow, there's no responsibility on the part of the seller, even if it's something which,
Right, it's ki'ilu above, it says that we're a bum seed.
yeah, there's no responsibility.
So the reverse should be true too, right? If you buy something and you eat it, and then the seeds actually grow because you have them, some seeds fell off into your garden and they grow, you should also be allowed to accept them.
But if you buy, let's say you buy, I mean, we got some mint seeds to plant. We have a little herb garden in our backyard. So we bought some mint seeds and we planted them. I mean, if the mint doesn't grow, can I really go back to Home Depot and return my seeds?
But Home Depot sold those mint seeds specifically for planting. This
Right.
seller doesn't say. That's
Exactly.
ambiguity.
So the
about
ambiguity
that
means it's not
That's
right.
what it's about.
That's fair. Okay, yeah. All right.
It's like if you buy mint in the market, if you buy fresh mint in the market and you try to then turn those into saplings, they sold it to you, perhaps, whether to do whatever you want, but they were really thinking of you that you would eat it.
Just what Judge said.
But if you happen to get it to sprout, they don't care.
Right.
So that's what Rashi says as well, which sounds like a limitation. That's only in the case he didn't specifically say they are meant for seeding.
Right. He has a loophole to say, I thought you were gonna eat them, so I didn't know they weren't gonna grow. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, Zer'onei gina she'enan nechalim. If the sale was of garden seeds, which aren't edible and only suitable for planting, like, I don't know, roses or whatever, chayav b'achareyotan, then the seller is responsible for their loss. Right. So if you're planting something, bulbs, or I don't know, whatever you plant with seed, I know you don't plant bulbs, whatever, but you're planting whatever you're planting, and they wouldn't be something you would eat, then for sure he's liable because you're not buying them to eat them because nobody eats them.
But David, I'm still concerned a little bit following what John said. I mean, we start with the statement with the Mishnah, hamocher perot lechavero, not hamocher zra'im lechavero. So if the seller sells fruit, what the buyer does with it, it's a responsibility of the buyer. It's nothing to do with the seller.
Correct.
Caveat
Right. But it's Zaronei Gina, but however, garden seeds.
So if I come up with a new apple, I have a really tasty apple that happens to grow in my backyard, and I start selling the apples to people, and I don't say, and I say, I'm going to sell you this at a premium because I'm going to sell, you can plant it and it'll give you an apple tree. It'll give you my apple tree, so you can then plant an apple orchard. Then if they don't grow, I might be liable, right?
But notice, Jeff, I mean, you're selling it under a slightly different condition, right?
Yes.
You're
Well,
upping the price.
therefore the responsibility is less because I didn't.
Yes,
Right. So when I put in the responsibility.
precisely. I share your point. Yes.
I don't know, Jeff. I mean, what you added into it, which I think is intriguing, but is not inherently in the text, is that would this be like for the people like the Monsanto where we're not allowed to grow it? Does this mean you can? I mean, theoretically, there's nothing here that prohibits a different stipulation, but I like the use of it for that purpose.
But
So
it
probably
could
they would
be-
not be. I'm sorry, go on.
Yeah, it could be that at that time, in order to preserve the seeds better, they would sell it as the whole fruit because then it preserves better, and you could still use it for seeding. At that point, you maybe even put the whole fruit into the ground. So because actually the flesh of the fruit is supposed to feed the seed as it grows. So the fact that they say a mocher perot doesn't necessarily mean that it is fruits. It could be definitely for seeding still.
All right, let's continue. Itamar, hamocher shur lechavero. So now we're going to do a related concern. If you sell an ox to your fellow, the nimsa nagachan, and it was found to be a gorer. Rav Amar hareza mekach taut. This is considered a purchase made in error, right? You should have disclosed that this was a violent ox. Ushmuel Amar yachol amar lo, the seller could say, l'shlita machartiv lach. I sold it to you for slaughtering. So if there's an ambiguity of its purpose, then the fact that it's a violent ox is irrelevant because you're going to kill it, doesn't make a difference.
So David, it seems to me that we're getting to the issue both of the food and for the ox, what should be the extent of disclosure by the seller? And I don't have the answer, but I think that's really what is being asked here in the background.
There's also the,
And in the absence of disclosure, what do you do?
Okay, fair enough, yes.
What this note, I'm sorry, go on.
But Mike, I think Mike was gonna say something.
what is the responsibility of the buyer? If I plant something and my soil is crumbling, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm responsible. Why should the seller be responsible? I don't get that. Or if I,
Well, I mean, you're right. The seller could go back and say, well, you planted it and didn't water it and whatever you did wrong.
right,
But under normal circumstances, again, you're a farmer, you know what you're doing.
ah,
I think there's an expectation, a certain level of expertise. These are not weekend gardeners,
I see.
you know.
Okay.
And so then if you say it doesn't grow, like, the product was defective.
I'm curious, David, if any of the people here, any of the participants know, let's say, I believe Monsanto is a big seller of seeds. When they sell it to the farmers,
Yeah.
are there any implied responsibility on these seeds? Do anyone know? Does anyone know about it?
There are, what Jeff talked about was exactly the case of a nearby farm. Because the farmer that's getting his genetically modified seeds, usually there is a contract. Usually there is an implied contract of sale, that how they will use them for the genetically modified seeds. And it goes both ways. The neighboring farms can profit from them, but also the neighboring farms might be in the business of saying we have no genetically modified food, and they sue the guy that's next to them. So this is all, the purchaser of these seeds is legally bound in many cases.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
I don't want to get too hung up in it because it's really, for Jewish law, it's a question of the validity of a contract like this. But they are asserting an intellectual property right. And when you buy it, you agree to honor that intellectual property. And then if it blows to another field, and that's part of the question, it blows into another field, like I never made a deal with you, right? So John makes a deal with Monsanto, but the seeds, as seeds do, blows into my field. Do I have to follow, does the IP hold up? But again, I think there's lots of
Of course,
room.
in technical things, it would hold up, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And there's no question. If I buy an iPhone and the chips are protected, and you find my iPhone, you still can't.
Right. That's what Monsanto is trying to assert about the seeds. And those who argue with it are saying that's fine for chips, but listen, these are seeds, they're naturally growing things. You can't patent life. I mean, that's the
a
argument.
separate question,
big
whether
case
it's
a couple
second
years
degree.
ago.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to comment one way, but I'm just saying that the issues that come up are more about the nature of conditions that one can apply than about this question of a sort of caveat emptor. Okay, let's do just a little bit more. Ulechaze, we can finish the thing with the ox, I think. Ulechaze, but let's see what we're talking about here. If he's a man who usually buy oxen for slaughter, lenichsata, then even Rav should agree the ox was purchased for slaughter. Ilaradya, but if he usually buys ox for plowing, laradya, then he should know it's plowing. So in other words, how can you have this argument? Isn't it pretty clear why or what you're doing? Bigavra dezavi lahachi ulahachi. This dispute deals with a person who usually buys oxen for this and that, right? He's customary, does both things, so you can't make a decision. But let's see what the purchase price was. So look, we know that plowing oxen are more expensive than slaughtering oxen. So if he paid the price of a plowing oxen, then that's ridiculous. Ada, I think you've joined us. We're finishing up some material from the Talmud class, and then the intro class is going to start at 11:25. So la tzricha diyakar bisra. The dispute between Rav and Shmuel is necessary only in an instant where meat became expensive. The kam bidami radya, and as a result, the price of an ox suitable for slaughter stood at the same price as having an ox for plowing, right? So whatever, there's famine or something, so the prices are unusual. Ihachi, then so the nafkamina. What's the difference? Nafkamina latircha. The difference is regarding whether the buyer must deal with the bother of disposing of the ox, right? Because in other words, there's no harm now to the purchaser, because if he slaughters the ox, he still makes his money back and he's fine. So why is there a problem? So hechidami, what are the circumstances? 92b1. If there's no money available in the seller's possession for the buyer to collect a refund from him, le'akiv Torah bezuzek. Why does Rav say the buyer returns the ox? Let him retain the ox in lieu of his money. The amre inshi, for people say, min mare rishvate, from one who is in your debt, pare afre, collect even bran as payment, right? In other words, you always want to make good on a debt, and you'll take whatever you can get to make good on it. La tzricha, it's only the case, where there is money in the seller's possession from which to collect from it. So if the seller's got nothing left, it doesn't matter, but if there's money to collect, then we want to do it. Rav Amar Hareza Mekachtut, then it's a purchase made in error. Bata Ruba Azlina, for we follow the principle of the majority. Veruba Larajizapin, the majority of ox are purchased for plowing. So that's the normal case, so that's what we assume. Ushmul Amarlach, Ki Azlina Bata Ruba, when do we follow the principle of majority? The Isura. We're only doing that in issues of prohibitory law, right? In questions of permissions and prohibitions. The Mamona low, but in monetary cases, we don't follow the principle of majority. The whole idea of Bataruba doesn't apply to money stuff. And that's actually a big deal to say. That's a huge legal principle. So let's stop with that. We'll pick up in Baba Batra, continuing in chapter 6 next time. Delightful as always to see you. And again, I will be in this perch, God willing, for the foreseeable future. Feel welcome to join or feel welcome to be on Zoom, whatever floats your proverbial boat.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
Thank
all.
you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Shavua tov.
Yeah, Shavua tov.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll leave this, I'm gonna leave this window open because my new class is coming in. So yeah.
Okay, bye.
And let's open the gate.
How are people doing?
Thank God.
That's good.
How about you?
Oh, we're doing okay. We've been busy with my father-in-law. He was in the hospital a few weeks ago and is still recovering. So there's been a lot of all hands on deck.
What's been going on with him?
Well, he had an infection, and so he was in the hospital.
But did you bring him out to California?
But he's been home for 2 weeks now. Oh, he's been living in this area for a couple of years now.
Ah,
Yeah. We moved him out, fortunately, in I think 2018. So otherwise, it would have been very, very difficult with the pandemic. But he's been here. He's on a blind street in Menlo Park. So we spent a lot of time going back and forth across Stanford.
This is Gene.
This is Gene. Yeah, this is Gene.
It's a very long
Yeah.
one.
So my parents are in the Moldau, right? And so, yeah, so that's the other old folks. But Gene lives here, and Marianne moved his brother, who's his older brother, in with him. So we have the two boys in the house, and so Gene has a caregiver full time, and then the caregiver also makes meals for Carl. And so I've been busy, and I've actually been staying here because Marianne went to Boston and got her brother, and she was quarantining after coming back because we're so worried about Delta variant in her father. And she just got her bill of health, so my quarantine is ending, so I don't have to live here anymore. I can go back home.
Very nice.
Anyway,
Refuah Shleima to everybody.
all right. Well, everybody have a nice week.
so for all-
Enjoy your class, David. Take care. Yasher koach to everybody for getting a new chapter.
Yes.
I mean,
Can you meet for a moment? I want to give you a
There's a case of a plant that only grows in a very cool, a very warm climate. You try to change it, it won't operate on a different climate.
Tell her that's my mother's name.
Oh, you know Anna, she's the one who's been.
I said Ada, Ada.
Oh, Ada, yeah.
ADA. My mother pronounced it Ada, but that's okay. Is that
Welcome,
close?
everyone. Glad you're here. We're gonna start in just a minute.
Have fun.
I'm gonna run and use the restroom before you start. I'm just gonna go run and use the bathroom, so keep chat among yourselves.
Great class, Rabbi. Sometimes good to see you on the class. I'm never tired of that story. It just was so fun.
All right, a few other people I'm gonna let into the room. Anna, can I make you a co-host and then you can just let people in if we see them in the thing? Okay, that'd be great. Just awkward for me to like run over to the computer all the time. So far, I don't have anybody in person yet, so I'm just gonna wait a couple more minutes to get started. We're called for 11:25. So just give us a few more minutes and we'll begin. Ada, I see a background there. I don't know if you're actually there.
For me? You cannot see me?
No, Anna, I can see you. There's someone named Ada, who I
Oh,
think is Julia's aunt, but I just see beautiful statuary, but not a human being.
yeah, she was there a moment ago. I think she stepped out.
Okay.
Mhm.
So like I said, I'm just gonna give people a couple moments and then we'll begin. Good to see you all. Anna, we need your daughter and granddaughter on Shabbat very badly.
Rabbi Booth,
Yes.
hi, it's Julia. I wanted to log in today just to make sure that my aunt, everything's okay. I think she just stepped out of the room for the moment, but, and I'm sure she'll be back. But meanwhile, the phone's at her place. I think she left me dangling on the other end. So I'm trying to call her and tell her. I think she tuned into the earlier class and didn't realize it was a different class.
She just came, she was just there for like 10 minutes. She didn't show up. She came at like 11.
Yeah, and I think she didn't realize that it wasn't the Intro to Judaism class. So I'm trying to reach her to just tell her what's what and ask her to come back since it is now class time. I think she probably just stepped out for a minute, but they're not picking up their cell phone, and the landline is, I think she just put it down and forgot to actually hang it up. So I'm getting busy signals on that end, but I'll try and get her back on as soon as I can.
Yeah, that's great. I'm just gonna walk out to the front. I opened up a gate, but I just want to make sure that there's nobody standing at the gate waiting to come in. So I'll
Of course. Of course.
and then we'll get going.
Hi, this is Rochelle, and I'm new here. This is my first time logging in. I just want to ask if it's okay if I don't put the video on.
I doubt that somebody's gonna object to that. Welcome, Rochelle.
Hi. So we have okay. Okay, then I have to get ready. Then I
Somebody is actually showing upside down, which is funny.
okay.
Hello.
Rabbi Booth stepped out of the room for a moment to see if there are people waiting at the gate. So we're gonna start in a few minutes. Meanwhile, I keep clicking and admitting new people. So people are still joining.
Okay. Excuse me. Since this is my first time, how long is gonna be this event?
This is my first time as well. Let's wait for maybe a moment and Rabbi Booth will come back. He went to see if there are any people waiting at the gate to get in. And then he'll tell us. I'm pretty sure of that.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All righty. Good to see you all. Tolga, welcome. Elizabeth.
Hello, Rabbi.
Do I do anything here?
Seems to be a little thin on in-person today, which is fine. So just so you know, my plan is for the foreseeable future is to have both in-person and virtual as an option. If you want to come to the in-person, feel very welcome. If you want to come to virtual, that's also great. I know a few of you are from out of the area. Ada, I think you're coming in from the East Coast. Rochelle, you're in from way, way, way out, almost to Stockton. So, yeah. And Essie, it's great to see you.
I'm trying to get you back.
Hi, David Both.
Hello. All right. So let me begin. Again, to welcome everybody. There's a few people who are missing, so I'm going to send out another email later today and see what happened. But anyway, it's great to see you all and great to begin. What I want to do today is two things. I want to give a kind of overview of the year-long course. So I know a couple people, and Anna, you may be in this category. So actually, Anna, give me some sense. Are you planning to come? Do you want to be here for the year-long course, or you just want to do the unit on the holidays?
Are you asking Anna or Ada?
Anna, you.
Okay. Yep, me. Yep, my plan is to be here for a year-long course.
Great. So then I will spend, that just frees me to give the real focus today on the whole course. If you were here only for the high holidays, I'd just be a little shorter on that piece. So what I want to do today is I want to do a quick overview of the year-long course. I'm going to break it up into segments. So you should feel free to participate in segments that are relevant. If for some reason you feel like this is already an area that you're comfortable and know, it's okay to skip. I also realize people have lives. So I hope that you'll make a regular commitment to coming to class. Every class matters. At the same time, we will record the class. So if for some reason you can't be here, you can watch the video at a later time. And just let me know if for some reason you're not able to be here. Yeah, so let me share the screen with you. Let's see if I've got this up here. Where did I put this thing? Wait a minute. I had all my windows open. had this open. I'm not sure what happened to the window.
Okay.
Sorry, it shut down. My computer crashed apparently, so it shut down. I had all this stuff open, which is now closed. So let me just reopen this. I apologize. So I have a Google Classroom account, and I'll invite you to it, where I've got the class set up, and I'll keep materials there. It actually has all of the materials from last year's class. So I'll gradually be updating it as the course goes on for our stuff for this year, but it's very helpful, and it gives you a sense of the whole course of the course. So this document, come in. You're in the right place.
Is it just me?
The person, we have 9 screens on the Zoom. So come sit down, sit comfortable. Glad you're here.
Could you record for my wife?
I am recording.
Oh, awesome.
Yes, 100%. Okay, so first of all, just to review the syllabus itself. So the idea is this to be essentially a 10-month course. We'll wrap up sometime in May. The goal here is to explore Jewish ideas, theology, and practice. So I should just be clear some things that this excludes, which are terrific topics. Okay, this is not about Jewish culture and art. This is not really about Jewish politics. It's not particularly about Israel. Okay, those are all terrific topics. I highly recommend all of them. I have expertise in a couple of those and others not really. So, but just to understand, this is an intro to Jewish ideas, theology, and practice, right? That's the purpose of the course. We will meet every Sunday from 11:25 to 12:25. I update for the few times that I can for vacation or other reasons. And in addition to the classes, there will be homework as well as suggestions to experiment with Jewish practice. And particularly those experiments will hover around Shabbat, Kashrut, and prayer, okay? Everyone in the class is invited to schedule a 30-minute session with me. I've set up Calendly, so you should just be able to follow the link here, right? So if you click on the link, then this comes up, and then you can just open it, and then you will see my calendar, and you can pick a date, and it'll tell you the times that I have available, okay? Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that I found Calendly is fabulous, by the way. I'm an unpaid, I should get them to pay me money to advertise their product because it's been great and saved me a ton of time. So here's the deal. You're invited to the 30-minute session if you are taking the class because you want to learn with no other purpose. I know that sounds judgy and I don't mean it that way. If, however, you're in an active conversion program, the 30-minute appointments are required, right? I want to have that 30-minute check-in with you monthly and get a sense of progress. If you're taking the class for other reasons, you're invited. I'd love to check in with you. I'd love to talk, but it's the ball's in your court for that one, okay? And the 30 minutes is your time more than it's my time. So as people know who've come to those sessions, I usually ask kind of a how are you with this and what's going on, and then we're off to the races, right? Then people have questions, thoughts, things they want to explore. I don't structure anything for it. It really is a check-in. It's your time. And the purpose of it is, particularly for those converting, but also for anybody, is we have a group dynamic here. Sometimes it can be very, very nice to have just a little one-on-one time to explore something in more detail, or there may be a hesitation or a concern that comes up that is either specific to you or just something that isn't something you want to share in a larger group. And that's the purpose, okay? We will also, I don't have this on the curriculum, but I'll also make an effort to have, a Friday night dinner that we can join together as a class. We'll have some Saturday morning services where we'll try to get everybody here to daven, like those kinds of things are also part of this. Each class will have 2 components. And so we're gonna have, I should have said, right, sorry, I need to just update that because I changed it slightly. We're gonna have a cognitive feast that focuses on Jewish practice, theology, and history. That will include some didactic learning. In other words, I'll talk a little bit, we'll go over some sources, that kind of thing. It will also include usually a breakout session where we have an opportunity to be able to talk to 1 or 2 other people in the class and get to know them and explore together an idea, thought, issue. And that will also have some homework. And then in addition, we'll have some practical elements that we're working on too. So meaning a particular ritual or practice. So like today, we're going to learn the blessing over bread. That means we'll practice it. I'll send you home with it in the hopes that you'll actually say the blessing over bread a bunch of times between now and next week. Okay. I do ask you please to arrive on time and be ready and focused for the class. I will be here ready to go, and so I just ask you to do the same. You're more than invited to anything at Kolamet while you're in the class. Everything, I shouldn't say everything, nearly everything right now is being streamed. So even those of you who are in other parts of the universe can certainly join us as well. But I really encourage you especially to come to some of our Friday nights and Shabbat morning. And please purchase the following 4 books. You want to get a Tanakh. I recommend New JPS. That's a Jewish Bible. Tanakh means Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, right? The Torah, the prophets, and the writings. Then there's a book called The Sabbath by Abraham Joshua Heschel. There's How to Run a Traditional Jewish Household by Blue Greenberg, which is a terrific kind of overview of Jewish living written by a modern Orthodox scholar named Blue Greenberg. And then a complement to it is a book called Miriam's Kitchen by a woman named Elizabeth Ehrlich, who's a terrific writer and memoirist. And her grandmother was named Miriam. So where Blue Greenberg, everything works out great and all the practices are wonderful and you should do them and they will enhance your life and make you a better and happier person. Elizabeth Ehrlich is more wrestling with and trying to figure out her own path. So I think they're a nice complement to each other. Okay, any questions about the class materials?
I will be able to access this like tomorrow?
Access the document?
Yes, the document with the names of what I have to purchase.
Yeah, I'll send a follow-up email to the class that will include an invite to this curriculum, and I'll also send the books in that email.
Thank you.
For sure. And then, as I mentioned, I'd like to have a Friday night dinner in person towards the end of the course, which of course would be great for its own reasons. Okay, so that's just an overview of what we're going to do. Any other questions or thoughts about the class as a whole before we get into our first topic? Okay, so then let me just explain to you the next couple weeks, because we're starting right before the holidays, and the holidays are early this year. There's an old joke, I think it's a Jackie Gleason line, though I know Julia dropped off so she could correct me. No, Julia's there. Julia probably knows. But you know, the Jewish holidays are always late or early, they're never on time. And the reason for this is that the Jewish calendar is a solar lunar calendar, which we'll go over in more detail next week, but it follows the solar cycle, but it's a little off by about 3 weeks every year. So there can be a little bit of movement. So this year, Rosh Hashanah, the Erev Rosh Hashanah is September 6th, right? The first night of Rosh Hashanah is September 6th. So that's early as these things go, okay? So what I wanted to do today was look at an issue of theology, was to talk about God, because I feel like that would be a good intro to the course. Then next time, and then for the rest of the next 4 or 5 weeks, will be all about the holidays. We'll talk about Rosh Hashanah, we'll talk about Yom Kippur, we'll talk about Sukkot. So we'll be very heavily on a practice holidays element, because they're all boom, 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 boom happening. So you should like know what's going on. So that means we want to understand the practices and customs of each holiday. We want to be sure that we know a little bit about the liturgy of each holiday, and we want to be able to have a feeling of, you know, being able to participate in each holiday. But for today, I thought like to just start without talking about God felt like, I don't know, it just felt like it was too abrupt. Like we need to, I was trying to plan and I just realized, I just felt like I would be doing you a disservice. And those of you I know I love and want to care for, and those of you I'm getting to know, I know I'm going to fall in love with and want to care for. So I got to do it right. Okay. So, and the other thing I should just say overview is we're also going to have a Hebrew curriculum that some people will be working on. So we'll begin that from the beginning. That will be optional at the end of each class. So if you want to do, we won't do it today, but we'll begin next week. So if you want to do the Hebrew curriculum, we will start by looking at, I'll give you an assignment for this time. Tolga, by the way you're sitting with the antlers behind you makes you look like you've got antlers. It's hysterical. The way that we'll do it is I'll give you some stuff to study for next time, and then we'll spend, like I say, at the end of class, we'll stop. I'll say, okay, now we're done. We're going to move into 15 minutes of Hebrew. Okay. So if you want to do the Hebrew, so if you want to do the regular class without Hebrew, it's 11:25 to 12:25. If you want to include the Hebrew, then just add yourself in an extra 15 minutes. So we'll end at whatever that is, 12:40. Okay. Terrific. And Tolga, tell your sister, by the way, she told me she's coming back and I miss her and I don't know where she is. Okay.
Sure, definitely will do.
She's okay?
Oh yeah, she's doing fine. Thank you for asking.
Okay, so let's begin with a question, okay? First of all, you can do this as a quick show of hands. How many people, oh, Cheryl, welcome. I'm glad you're here. We just did a quick overview of the class and we're jumping into some questions of theology now. So let me begin with the following question. How many of you believe that your parents, I don't know whether to say this in a past or current tense, right? Either continue to love you or that you know when they were alive, they loved you, right? How many people believe that their parents, that they know that their parents love or love them? Just show of hands. Okay. Anna, you hesitated. Anna, actually, Anna, are you, I don't mean to ask an intimate question. That I meant it as soft pitch. So first of all, I don't mean to bring up trauma. I mean, really, Is it something you're seriously hesitating about?
It made me think. Yeah, your question made me think. Yeah, but no trauma. Don't worry about that.
Okay. So then the follow-up question, which I'm interested in a real answer, is for those of you who feel comfortable saying, yes, I know my parents love me, how do you know? Or how did you know, or whatever? Go ahead. Should I call you Rochelle, Mary? Just tell me how to address you.
Rochelle. Call me Rochelle.
Got it.
By giving us freedom to be independent and being teaching us to be how to be strong and to stand up against this a lot of bad things going on in your life. I was trained that to be resistant and to be I forgot the word. So my parents they taught me a tough love. So to me, that way, that's how they express that by showing those kind of things, by disciplining me, it shows that they love me.
Great. So one of the ways that you can tell is, I mean, you said a lot of beautiful things, Rochelle, right? Like their involvement in your life, their sort of care for the outcomes that are happening to you, and to think about what are the limitations and behaviors and restrictions they're going to put on you to help you get there. Yafet. Are there other things that people sort of, and Anna, if you want to jump in also, you have a beautiful daughter who it's pretty clear she knows. I asked her this question, by the way, and she unhesitatingly said her mother loves her. So also how you maybe express that to her, right? So other answers, how do you know, or how do you know that your parents love you or loved you? Yeah, go ahead, Ada. Or is it Ada or Ada?
Ada.
Ada.
Ada is much prettier. That's kind of like Hebrew. So call me either one. When you say Ada, I think you're thinking of Anna. I don't hear that well. So I don't know if my parents loved me or not. A lot of evidence that there were problems, but they did love me when I became engaged, which I never married, but I became engaged to a very conservative to Orthodox Jewish doctor. All of a sudden, I was the best thing on the earth, so that fulfilled what they wanted from me. Though it didn't work out, he died, so that never took place. So I felt loved when I fulfilled their expectation of me. I didn't fulfill.
Right. So that's Ada, that's really interesting, right? There's a conditional experience that you had. When you met certain rubrics, you felt their love, and when you weren't meeting those rubrics, not so much, and that creates some uncertainty. I mean, I would say a couple of things, right? People probably have parents. My parents tell me they love me, which I'm grateful for. My parents are involved in my life. One of the ways I tell as an adult that my parents love me. So Rochelle, when I was a kid, I think setting limits and rules was part of it. Now, paradoxically, and I don't wish this on them, but they sometimes get worried about stuff in my life that they don't need to worry about. And it's not that I want them to worry by any means, but I see that it's because they love me, right? They love me, they get worried. Maybe, I complain about something at work or whatever. They just imagine a catastrophic thing is going to happen and their poor boy chick's life will be ruined. Like, it's sweet, right?
Sure.
Okay. So that unconditional love that I experience is because they love me. I try to offer this to my wife, that I love Carol, not for what she does, but just for who she is. And including the faults, like with a full no. Okay. So here's another thing to say about love. Many of us have children. We all have people we love and care about, whether romantic partners, children, family, or others. When you love someone, talk to me a little bit about their ability to influence or affect you. Do you understand the question?
Can you repeat it again, please?
Yeah, the ability that someone you love to influence or affect you. I'll give you an example. I had a text exchange last night with my son and then a phone conversation that was very unsettling and unsatisfying. And I found it very, very stressful and upsetting. And it took me a while just to sort of sit down and recover and get back. I had a great Shabbat. I had tremendous equanimity. I felt so good. And then it kind of blew up right after Shabbat with this tense thing with my kid. And it took me a little bit to like come back down again, right? He affected me very dramatically. And I got like, I overreacted too, by the way. Like he called me, if you had called me, Rochelle, I would have been so cool. Can I just tell you? Okay, I would have been cool, I would have been calm, it would have been great, right? But my son called me, he triggered some stuff in me and some things I worry about for him. And I overreacted. And then it stressed me out for a while. And he was also being a pain. I mean, there was whatever, it's definitely took two to tango. Okay, but I was influenced by it. You see what I'm saying? It created volatility in me. People understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So I believe that when we love someone, we are vulnerable to them.
Yeah.
We are what?
We are vulnerable to them.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So, you know, again, if I think of you seem to have a very good partnership. But I mean, if she gets ticked at you, it gets hard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, if Carol's mad at me, I hate it when Carol's mad at me. But more to the point, right? Like if Carol's upset, Carol's having some problems with her knee and she's got like an autoimmune thing. And it's like upsetting, right? I mean, it's not just like, it's harder to have equanimity because I worry and it creates all kinds of stories for me and whatever, it's hard, okay? So we're vulnerable to people that we love. Oh, thank you. Baby viewing. No, and to this point, right? Essie, I think it makes you, oh, hello. It makes Essie happy when the kid's doing good. And it's scary when the kid's having problems, okay?
Yeah.
And you should only have nachas and joy for him, by the way, Essie. And by the way, I made the parents, because the parents also like me, his parents, I went over to do the bris, and it's possible that he spat up all over my shirt, which I thought was hysterical, right? It didn't bother me in the least. It's just, he was like 8 days old being an 8-day-old baby, okay? I mean, like, it's just what babies do. And I ended up wearing one of Gary's old shirts to do this bris, which is also hysterical. So I found the whole thing hysterical and funny, but I was moved by it. And I was moved by the way everybody felt about everything, right? There was a sweetness to it because we're vulnerable to each other. Okay, so here's my follow-up question to think about. What does it mean then to be perfect?
Nothing's perfect. Okay.
Consider, but sometimes we describe God as perfect. So I want to at least play for a minute with the idea of what perfect could mean. In Hebrew, the word for perfect is mushlam, which comes from shalem or shalom. People have heard the word shalom before, maybe? Right, so shalom is used as a greeting. It literally means peace or wholeness. It's actually a sweeter greeting than, it doesn't really mean hello or goodbye, like it really means peace or wholeness. So it's a kind of blessing when you say it. My kids, by the way, when they were in school, you know, they went to a Jewish day school, and so they learned that shalom means hello and goodbye. So you know that old Beatles song, right? You say hello and I say goodbye, hello, hello. So they're like, you say shalom and I say shalom, shalom, shalom. You know, that was kind of funny. Okay, that didn't land well, I apologize. So it means wholeness. So perfection implies, at least in Hebrew, a certain kind of completeness or wholeness. Okay, I believe that the idea of perfection means that you are unable to be injured or hurt. Is that fair? Right, if you're perfect, then you can't be damaged or hurt, because otherwise you wouldn't be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I believe that has to function temporally as well as physically. Okay, meaning I can't be hurt now, but I also can't be hurt in the future.
Correct.
Okay, now if I'm right, then something that is perfect can also not change. Are you with me?
Mm-hmm.
Because if it could change, then it was always hiding this broken piece all along that now has been revealed. Okay?
Correct.
And I'll make an even stronger assertion. If something is perfect, that perfect thing or entity or whatever cannot love.
Correct.
Let me just say that again. A perfect thing cannot love. And here's what I mean by that. I know that I love my children. I know that my parents love me and that I love them. I am vulnerable to them and they can hurt me and they can change me. Right? They elevate my mood. My daughter Naomi is kicking it in Tucson right now in her first job, and it makes me super happy. Okay, right? I am vulnerable to it. She called me on Friday upset about just whatever, just life, getting settled in. She had just a tough Friday, whatever. She's crying on the phone. That like takes my mood down a little bit, right? Although then paradoxically, it makes me feel good about myself because like I was a good listening ear to my kid. Do you see what I'm saying? Like I'm changing all the time in relationship to the people that I love. And I would say even more strongly with my children and with my parents and with my partners, I learn from them. And that's part of what it means to love, right? Carol influences me in very direct ways, the type of human being that I have become. And she has helped shape me as a person. And my kids are now helping shape me as a person. They give me amazing advice. Okay, so there's something about love that includes changing or dynamism or vulnerability. Now, I want to just identify, any of you ever heard of Kierkegaard?
No.
Kierkegaard was a very famous Danish Christian philosopher in the late 1800s. He wrote a book called Fear and Trembling, which I highly recommend, by the way. It's not Jewish particularly, but it's a great wrestling with theology and with the story of the binding of Isaac. And it's one of these works of philosophy that's taught as like it's a very deep thing. It like scares you. The beginning is hysterical. Like the first 30 pages are drop dead, laugh out loud, belly laugh funny. Because he talks about like what would happen today if God said sacrifice your son, and like how people would react, and we all think he was crazy, and like we'd bring him to the minister and probably lock him up. And I mean, it's just really funny. But one of the things that Kierkegaard puts out is that Abraham was the knight of faith. And he imagines that Abraham, as it were, has this maiden that he loves. And it doesn't matter how the maiden feels about him. His love is perfect and truly unconditional. So if the maiden reciprocates in that love, great. If the maiden is abusive and does not reciprocate, doesn't make any difference to him, right? The love is perfect and whole and untouchable from external stimuli, okay? I respectfully disagree with Kierkegaard, right? I think that's actually abusive and deeply problematic and not real love. It is love in the abstract rather than love of the actual human being. And if I'm going to love an actual human being, I have to be open to them. And I have to be affected and changed by them, because that's what it means to be in relationship and conversation. Right? Do you understand the two poles, theological poles that I'm putting out? So many religions, Christianity, many branches of Christianity and Islam, as well as some branches of Judaism, posit that God is perfect. And they like Kierkegaard's idea of the knight of faith, meaning God loves us unconditionally, which is a beautiful, beautiful idea, but that God also loves us in a way that is unchangeable. If you can imagine not the image of the old man in the beard, but let's say like the Buddhist monk that is just blissed out and in connection with the all and in love with everything, okay? Which is beautiful, except truthfully, I want to be loved for me a little bit. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't want to marry the Buddhist monk. I mean, I guess for many reasons, but the Buddhist monk in this moment of connection with everything, which is also a beautiful theological pull. I don't mean to put it down, right? That sense of general connection to things and love of all is also sustaining and beautiful. And there's also room for specific love of people that has a volatility, vulnerability, and openness to it. So this is all, I don't know, I hope not an overly long way of saying the following. Okay, which is this. People, I think, believe several contradictory things about God, and they get stuck in their theology, and I want to notice it so that we can be freed from it to open up some ideas of faith. Number one, they believe that God is perfect. Number two, they believe that God is good. And number three, they believe that God is all-knowing and all-powerful. I could link those as two, but I think you'll see they overlap. I feel like if you knew everything, then you could also do everything and vice versa. Okay, but I don't want to get hung up on that. Just take that as a thing, okay? If you believe those three things, God is perfect, God is all powerful and all knowing, and God is good, then I have a huge problem, which is how do I explain the shit in my life? Okay, because if God is perfect and all powerful and good, then bad things shouldn't happen to me, particularly things that are happenstance. I have a son with a genetic disorder. How can God allow that? I didn't do anything to cause that. right? I mean, there's some things maybe I deserve. Like I'll admit, there's some of my problems that are self-inflicted. Okay, both in the sort of I just messed that up kind of way, and in the more karmic sort of a way. But there's other things that happen to me that I can't ascribe that way. So it doesn't quite fit, and then we get stuck. And the other problem I think we get into with that is if God is perfect and good and all-knowing and all-powerful, then we sort of intuit that God's in this like blissed out space, but not particularly noticing me, which is kind of uninteresting. So like, even if it's true, I'm not sure I want to get into a relationship with that God. It's not compelling. Okay, it's kind of like, okay, great. So that's a problem I think many, many people have. What I want to suggest to you is that I believe I believe in God, by the way, I just want to say that up front. I believe that we can develop a theology that lets go of one of those pillars, and that will free us up to believe in God. And the pillar that I think you can see that I'm letting go of is the idea of God being perfect. Okay, and let me tell you the following story that I like to tell myself theologically. This is based on Jewish mysticism, okay? It seems to me, and when I say, I want to be clear, like I feel like this is a story I'm telling myself. Whenever we do theology, Cynthia Ozick, who's a great Jewish writer, makes the point, theology points towards God, but does not contain God, okay? How many of you ever read the Narnia books? You read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? People know from this? Wow, only a few. All right, so The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is a children's classic. It's a horrific book, which has a whole Christological Christian element to it. There's a lion in it named Aslan, who is sort of a Jesus stand-in. And it's C.S. Lewis was a Christian theologian. He's trying to do something very interesting with sort of creating a mythic story that will capture some of the things that he believes about Christianity. And it's genuinely art in the sense that he managed to both do that, but then transcend his own theology and write something truly beautiful for the world. He makes a great comment in there, which is that they're talking about the lion Aslan, and one of the characters says to the other, Aslan is not a tame lion, right? Meaning theology is not under your control. God does what God wants to do. We don't contain God. Okay, so I just want to say that up front, right? We're trying to talk about the infinite and finite terms, so we're doing the best we can here. So I'm telling you a story. I don't mean to contain God in my story, but rather to help us make some progress. So here is the story. It seems to me at the beginning of all things, there was only God. Now, by the way, if I were a cosmologist, I would say there was an energy soup that existed and there was no time and space in any dimensions had yet formed. Then something happens within that divine entity that causes a flash that then leads to the creation of the universe. Again, cosmologists talk about the Big Bang. It's a very parallel story. This is largely from 12th century Jewish theology. So in some ways, it sort of anticipated the modern, more scientific story, with the singular exception that in our version, in the Zohar version, God has a personality, which is not the case, I think, in the cosmology version, okay? So what is it that changes in God, or what causes the Big Bang, if you will? I think it goes like this. God realizes that there is a choice, and the choice is either to continue to live in stasis and perfection, and to have, I would say, a generic love for all that is, but not a specific love for anything. Because specific love is painful and difficult and volatile, and perfection can't tolerate it. Or to let go of that perfection and choose to love, knowing that it's a paradoxical choice. Because as soon as God chooses to love, that means God has to withdraw and create space for the other and allow for free choice and let there be pain and suffering and horrible things in the world, right? So God, out of love, says, I'm going to let Booth have a kid with a genetic disorder. Do you know what I mean, right? In other words, the paradoxical choice of love is that God is saying, I know people will suffer, so that I, God, know there's a selfishness to this. It's going to create suffering in the world, but I'm going to choose to do it because ultimately I choose love over anything else. I choose love over perfection. I choose love even though it allows suffering. That's the story that I like to tell myself about God. I find it descriptive of many things. First of all, it helps explain, again, the garbage, the difficulty in my life, right? Because God's self is stuck in a paradox. It also means that there's a motivation for human action. I want to come to know this God because God created the universe, because God wanted to know the other and realized there was a possibility for love. And I find that incredibly motivating. It creates responsibility because God is stuck in a paradox, and it's only through my own actions that I can help make a difference. Meaning I have power actually that God doesn't, right? That by observing Jewish practices and ethical behavior, I can make other people's lives free from some of the suffering that they experience. So let me tell you a quick story about that. Actually, let me pause for a minute. Questions, reactions before I know I'm talking a lot today, and it's a first class, so I promise you'll have lots of opportunity to engage. Just I wanted to get us going. So there are reactions or thoughts before I tell my story. Go ahead, Cheryl. I can't hear you though. Cheryl, there's something wrong with the sound on your end. I can't hear you. You're not muted, but I'm hearing others. You can maybe chat, send it in the chat or something. I'm not sure what's happening. Right, am I right? Just, Ada, can you just say something really quickly?
Hi. How
Yeah,
you doing?
Cheryl, it's only on your, I'm hearing other people's screens, so there's something wrong on yours. Maybe you haven't joined the sound. Anyway, type it in the chat and I'll react to it. Other thoughts before I tell the story? And of course, you get to participate. All right, so here's my story, okay? Before Rosh Hashanah, there's a boy who's about 8 years old whose mother gets diagnosed with an inoperable cancer. By saying God is stuck, it sounds like you're limiting God. Yeah, nachon. I'm saying that God, in the choice to give away perfection and in the choice to love and create, and in creating room for us, then gives up capacity that God otherwise had. And I would say the same thing in raising a child. One of the things that I'm noticing in raising my children is I do my best parenting when I help them figure out who they're going to be and I back off. And there's times where I have nothing that I can do, Cheryl, right? Where I see my children having problems and difficulties and I can't help them. I'm limited because there's no way for them to hear it. So I think it's a similar kind of idea. I mean, I'm making a metaphor, it's problematic, whatever, but I think that choice to love means then there's sometimes where God can't or won't or doesn't intervene because otherwise it makes the withdrawal and the opportunity, the desire to love and be influenced meaningless. If God smooths it all over, then it's no good. This is George Burns captures this in Oh God. Have you ever seen the old 70s movie? Okay, I'm sure Julia knows it because Julia knows every single classic movie in the universe. You want her on your trivia team if there's a movie category. Also, she's good at trivia in general, but specifically movies. God says to—
You're very kind.
Right? God says to his prophet, what's the singer's name? Julia, what's his name?
John Denver?
Yeah, it says to John Denver. John Denver says to him, how comes there's suffering in the world? And God says, I never figured out how to make a coin with only one side. This is actually very rich theology, right? Like I can't have life and love and the dynamism without the pain and the suffering. I don't know how to do it. So yes, I'm limiting God. So here's my story, okay? The story goes like this. This young boy, 8 years old, mother diagnosed with an inoperable cancer, and she becomes very sick right before the holiday. And he goes to Rosh Hashanah services, and he sits and he hears in one of the sections that's called Unatana Tokef. It's a sort of central prayer of the later part of the morning service, where it says, among other things, that God judges all of us, and the way to avert the decree is through tshuva, tefillah, ustaka, right? Through acts of repentance, acts of prayer, and acts of charity. So he hears this, and he thinks, aha, this is what I have to do to save my mother. So there's a homeless person that he's walked by for many years, and he says to the homeless, to his dad, listen, I want to invite this guy on the street into our house because we said we should do tzedakah during the holiday, and we need to. So the dad is very moved by this, right? This is an 8-year-old kid saying, this is great, let's invite this man in. So they make a little guest room for him, they let him stay with them over the holidays, gets him off the street. Like, it's clearly so good for this guy. And the mother, of course, is getting progressively sicker and sicker. And the guy is, eating the meals and he's sleeping and it rains outside. He's got a roof over his head and the mother's getting sicker and sicker. And right before Yom Kippur, the mother dies. And the boy is furious. And he won't go to services on Yom Kippur because he's so mad. And his father says to him, I don't understand. Like, what? I'm sad too, right? Like, I'm in tears. Your mother's died. It's horrible. I don't understand why you're so angry. And the boy says to him, listen, we read in the synagogue that if we do acts of tzedakah, it will avert the evil decree. So how come mom still died? And the father, with tears running down his face, right, at this beautiful, innocent child, says, listen, you don't understand. It's not our evil decree that we averted. It's his. Right? So we can alleviate the suffering of others, but that doesn't mean we can alleviate our own evil decrees. I can limit and go to war against suffering in other people's lives, and I can make a real difference, but that's not going to eliminate my own suffering. There's nothing I can do to do that, but I can go to war against suffering. And I would say that's one of the key views of Judaism, one of the key ideas of Judaism is that we are at war against suffering. So let me give you a little bit more theology, and then we'll move towards wrapping us up. You can see the screen, right? Oops, no, you cannot. Hang on 1 second. Let me just open up the right window. I'm sorry, I had all these windows open and then my computer crashed, which shut down all the windows, which is annoying. Just give me one moment. Okay. It's, by the way, been a great tech day. I was also trying to print this out for anybody who showed up in person and it wouldn't print. And anyway, you know how those days sometimes go. Okay. People can see this, yeah?
We can see, yep, the text.
So I want to identify, first of all, that God is central to Jewish thought. And in saying that, I want to notice something, okay? Jews like to say the following thing about themselves. So there's a huge problem in Judaism. First big problem, among the many, many problems, one of the biggest, is that the Pew National Study shows that Jews, the one thing that Jews agree on is that we're not Christian, okay? This is hugely problematic as a definition of identity. It does a terrible disservice to Christianity, first of all, but it also does a terrible disservice to Judaism. So we say the following thing, and it makes us think Jews don't care about faith. We point out that Christians put the centrality on faith over deeds, and that Jews put a centrality of deeds over faith. And I think there is truth in that. But Christians care about how you act, and Jews care about how you believe. Okay, so I don't want to eliminate either from the picture. So God is at the center. Having said that, we have multiple theologies in Judaism, which is what we'll try and end with today. Judaism believes in an active God. Praised are you, God, Redeemer of Israel. That present tense identifies that God's still involved and still in the universe. Now, much Western theology begins with an assumption of God's perfection. Maimonides, for example, says that we can only talk about God in a negative way because God's infinite is beyond our limited ability to apprehend. We're like ants trying to understand human civilization. And then God's presence is sort of an overflow. But the problem with this theology, as we've just identified, is that God sort of lacks personality. God is incapable of caring because God's only interested in true and false. Morality, our own behavior, becomes irrelevant to God. However, the Torah, the Bible, I believe, presents a very different image of God. We start with a God who begins to form creation, but it doesn't tell us why or how God does that. But the Torah does present us with a God who seems to really care. And there are moments that it identifies specifically that show that caring and show God's imperfection. For example, God brings a flood because the world is filled with iniquity in the time of Noah. And what God says is, I see that the hearts of people are filled all the time with violence, and I regret I created them. So let's just sit with that for 1 minute. First of all, according to the Bible, who created us? God. So God says, oops, right? I didn't do it right. Okay, so when God is upset with people, that means actually God is upset with God's own handiwork, which is immediately perfection. Then God says, I regret having done it. Okay, the word regret means I wish I didn't do it, right? I made a mistake. So the Bible describes a God who on multiple occasions has regret. Another example of that, by the way, is where God regrets having made Saul king. So it's not a one-off in Noah, is what I'm trying to say, right? God has moments of regret for creating humanity or entering into covenant with Jews or other things that God does. So the Bible presents an image of God who is imperfect and filled with pathos. So God is pathetic in the original understanding, not in our modern, right? The vernacular of pathetic, means sort of whatever, lame, not so good, right? Pathetic, though, means filled with pathos. God is emotionally invested in the universe in this view, right? God cares what happens. Right, and I'll send this to you, right? So then this gets into the idea of God maybe creating in a way that's meaning to leave some space and be involved in the universe. And the Midrash even says further that God created hundreds of worlds actually before finally creating this one. Meaning God created worlds, destroyed them, created worlds, destroyed them, and finally got to a point where there was something worth preserving. Meaning God's also got, the 2.0, 3.0, 4.0 version of software. Okay, right? That again, Cheryl, you asked about, am I limiting God? I mean, the Midrash itself seems to limit God. Monotheism suggests or requires that God is the source of everything. And Isaiah says, God creates light and darkness, fashions peace, and makes evil. Meaning, ultimately, I have to say, God is responsible for the suffering in my life. That's a painful thing to say. Now, I can talk my way out of it a little bit, okay? For example, DNA is great, okay? It allows life. It's an incredibly dynamic biological process that fills me with wonder. And it's also the reason we have a global pandemic, right? Viruses take advantage of the way DNA functions to subvert and mess with it. And there would be no pandemic in the absence of DNA, okay? So at some level, if God uses DNA as a tool to bring life into existence, then I have to say, ultimately, God is responsible for the pandemic and all of its inherent suffering. That's a hard thing to say. All right? People are with me? So here's what I want to do now. I want to identify multiple theologies in Judaism, then I want to show you a bracha, which I think will illustrate some of what I'm trying to get at. So within traditional Judaism, and what I mean is before the modern era, okay, obviously everything changes with the Enlightenment. 1789, French Revolution, the beginning of the Enlightenment era, lots and lots of things about the way people change and the way people think about God changes. So I'm saying pre-Enlightenment Jewish theology, okay? There are multiple Jewish theologies pre-Enlightenment that more or less peacefully coexist, unlike in Islam or Christianity, where they tend to go to war over their theologies, okay? Christian schisms, like if you think about the 100 Years' War in Germany, that's all about the Protestant world coming into existence, okay? I don't mean this as a criticism, but just as a description. Christian, is somebody asking a question? No, just okay. So here are some possible theologies in Judaism. Number one, the theology of the prayer book. In the prayer book, we are presented with an idea of a God who cares about us, is kind, though judgy, and listens to and heeds our prayer. That we pray for healing with the sense that God really will actively promote healing in that actual person. We open up our hearts and say, I'm having this particular problem right now, and we expect or hope that God will actively help us resolve it if our merits so allow. Okay, a kind of activist, caring, involved God. That's the theology of the Siddur. There is the theology of Maimonides, who believes that God is kind of perfect, but that God is this like overflow. God is this energy beyond human comprehension that fills the universe with glory and light and power, and that we can tap into it. And that when we perfect ourselves, meaning when we make ourselves whole and complete, we pick up on this divine energy and it's transformative. And I think Maimonides would say, by the way, this is true in all spheres, both political, religious, and ethical. So I think Maimonides would say, Martin Luther King picked up on something of God in the ethical sphere. I think Maimonides would say, Steve Jobs picked up on something of God in the area of design and electronics. You know what I'm saying? All of these things come from an ability to connect. And what the prophet does is the prophet really taps into that in a whole and complete way. Okay? So that's what it means to be a prophet, is to connect with this divine energy that's always in the universe. It's very much like radio waves. Okay, right now, NPR is broadcasting into this very room and actually through my body. Okay, however, it is entirely invisible and undetected by me unless I turn my radio on and pick up the relevant radio signals. So Maimonides is essentially saying the same thing, right? God's always around us, but we don't necessarily notice. And we can always tap into God, but God's much more like the radio signals, this energy. It's an ethical energy. It pulls us in a good way, but it's an energy and it doesn't do, it just is. Okay, that's Maimonides. Maimonides, by the way, was a 12th century Jewish philosopher. We'll do more on these biographies. I would argue that he was the smartest person who ever lived. Okay, and my argument in favor of this is by the time he was 30, he had written the foundational work of Jewish philosophy. He had written the foundational work of Jewish law. He had written a critical commentary on Jewish books. He'd written a medical textbook that was studied until the modern era. Okay, all before he was 30. So I feel like that's a pretty good case for being one of, if not the smartest guy who ever lived. By the way, is anybody in this room under 30? You're under 30, right? Tolga, how old are you?
I'm 35.
35. So Tolga, you're done, right? I'm 51. It's all over, right? We're never going to top that. So, so that's Maimonides' theology. The Zohar, Jewish mysticism, has an image of God as this energy that fills the universe, but that we really can tap into it, and that mitzvot and behaviors create a sort of chain that allows God's blessing to flow into the world and heal and restore things. So that when we do good, we're like almost divine roto-rooter. You know, we're like clearing out the tunnels that allow God's blessing to flow. And when we sin, when we do bad things, we're jamming up the works. And that God really loves us and cares for us. They talk about God in very human ways. God has both this element of God that's like totally blissed out and in love with everything. I agree, Tolga does look younger. Tolga, you could definitely pass for 20. And then God is this more activist God that really judges and cares and is involved in the universe in a more direct way, right? That's the Zohar. So I've already got 3 theologies and I haven't even broken a sweat. Okay? There is also the theology of some parts of the Midrash that believe the God encounter happens in the ethical. They imagine a story where Abraham notices that the world is on fire and it's in that moment that Abraham encounters God. So in other words, God lives in the ethical choice. God is in our ability to choose and to do. So I can go on like this for a while, okay? There are multiple theologies in Judaism that largely peacefully coexisted. When I teach this class, I am of course teaching primarily mine, because like I love mine and I believe in mine, okay? But part of what mine is one that exists and lives in dialogue with other theologies, and that I am aware we're trying to capture the infinite in something finite. And that means we're better off having some humility in our theology. Rochelle, you're maybe trying to say something?
No. Go ahead. No.
Okay, so we capture this in the prayer book. In the Amidah, which is the silent prayer, it's one of the central prayers of Judaism that we say 3 times every day, 4 times on holidays, 5 times on Yom Kippur. It begins, among other things, with the word God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob. And each time it says Elohei, right? God of, God of, God of. Now, normally, the second commandment tells us don't say God's name. So normally you would think they should abbreviate. It should say God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? Why say God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob? Now, there are a couple of reasons that I would give to answer. One is a formal reason, okay? Jewish liturgy is always composed of biblical verses. There's a biblical verse in Exodus where God describes God's self to Moses and says, who am I? I'm the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. But it only begs the question, why would God talk of God's self in this kind of strange, almost multiple personality manner? Right? This would be like if I would say to people, I'm the father of Naomi, I'm the father of Matal, and I'm the father of Joshua. Implying like somehow I'm like, if I say I'm the father of Naomi, Joshua, and Matal, that makes more sense. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a little weird locution. So what I believe God is trying to capture is that Abraham believed in God in one way, and it had a truth to it, captured something real about God. And Isaac believed in God in ways that overlap, but that were unique to Isaac. And that also captured something about God, and so also with Jacob, and so also with you, Moses, meaning the person to whom God is speaking in that moment, which is to say that the very prayer book itself is saying, there's room for your theology in this book. Right? We've got theologies that we're learning from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, from Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, from Maimonides, from the prayer book, all sorts of places. They help us and they illuminate us and they show us the way. And there was also the theology of Cheryl, and the prayer book is explicitly inviting it in and recognizing that Cheryl, by the nature of her uniqueness as a human being, is guaranteed to capture some elements of God that no one else in the universe can. In other words, we can never completely learn about God until Cheryl teaches us. It's impossible. Okay? Now, that's of course a wonderful statement of pluralism, by the way. One can extend this out beyond Judaism. In other words, this says we have what to learn from Christianity. This says we have what to learn from Islam and Hinduism and whatever else. Okay? It may give a priority to Judaism, but doesn't give an exclusivity to Judaism. All right, so is everybody with me so far? I don't mean to have lost you. I hope my purpose so far has been, it is heavy, big theology. Like, I love this stuff. Okay, I like philosophy a great deal. My youngest has started dating a guy who's studying philosophy at Oxford, and I'm like so excited that her boyfriend is into philosophy. So this is my stuff. Okay, I love this. So I don't mean to like overwhelm or go too fast. So if it's ever a problem, just slow me down, right? That's really okay. I love this. I'm very close to it. So sometimes that makes it harder for me to express it in the right way. Let me just get to, so I wanted to show you one last thing. No, here. Okay. So let's look at a particular practice. This is the blessing over the bread. Okay. Some of you perhaps have heard this blessing before. So I'll just sing it once. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Okay, which means, blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of all, who brings forth bread from the earth. So this is a very well-known bracha, right? Jews recite this anytime that they eat bread. And what that means is it's also part of both home and synagogue practice. So anytime that there's a meal in a community, people will very often say this blessing. So that causes it to be very, very well known. It's among the very few liturgies that most or many, many Jews are able to say and do. Okay, so let's just notice the language here. The language is a little strange. From where does bread come?
From the
It's not a trick question. Where do you get bread from? Does it grow out of the ground?
The earth.
I mean, right? See the problem here? Bread does not come from the earth, okay? There's a whole series of processes that we do to cause bread, right? Wheat grows from the earth, and then it's turned into flour, and then it's milled into, when it's milled into flour, and then it's turned into bread, and we eat it, right? There's a whole bunch of intermediate processes that this bracha has skipped. So the question is, why this very strange language? Most Jews, most people don't even think about it, okay? Most Jews are like, great, thanks for the bread, can we eat now? Okay? But I think there's a sophisticated theology that's hiding in plain sight. First of all, the reason for the language, as I mentioned to you before, is we tend to use biblical language in our blessings. Okay? So we have in the Psalm 104, God causes the grass to spring up, lebehema va'esav, right? Cattle and herb, la'avodat adam, for the service of humanity, lahotzi lechem min haaretz, to bring forth bread out of the earth. So one thing is that we're quoting from the Bible. That's part of why this phrasing comes like this. You see that this is just a biblical quote, slightly reworked. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, God is lahotzi lechem min haaretz. Now the verse is a little better for rational theology, because it says God causes the grass, and in this case it means like herby things like wheat to grow, for right, the grass that cattle can eat, and then herbs for humanity, meaning the wheat, right, the cattle grows to work the field, the wheat grows in the ground, and then that allows bread to be brought forth from the earth. This is a little more thoughtful or more rational than just divorcing it into the bracha. So what I want to suggest to you is that the bracha is hiding a theology in plain sight. If you want to believe that God brings forth bread from the earth and God's sort of involved in the world and not think too deeply about it, great, say your bracha, have your bread, move on with your life. We're fine, but we're too busy. We really don't want to spend any more time talking to you. Okay? If you want to think deeply about this, what the bracha is saying is God brings forth bread from the earth, meaning God is the ultimate cause of everything and the proximate cause of nothing. Right? God causes every process to exist. God's existence means the world is. But God doesn't directly do immediate outcomes. God sets processes in motion, and those are the proximate causes of things. So this is actually a really interesting and sophisticated theology that's being hidden in plain sight. And I think Judaism does this all over the place to invite us into more sophisticated theology if you want to wake up and pay attention. If you want to just sleep through it, fine. Right? We'll have more simple theologies for those who aren't ready or aren't able or who don't want to think more deeply. And there's a more deep theology for those who want. So let me end our session with another quick story and then a little homework assignment. Am I okay if I go to 12:30? I know I billed it as 12:25, but I had to start a minute or two late. I'm on my way. Okay, this is one of my favorite stories. So some of you have heard me tell this before. Oh, let me turn on the screen. There was another boy. This is a different boy. And I like to tell the story, by the way, of like, you know, he was more or less your age. Okay, so when I tell this to kids, right, whatever the age of the class is. Okay, so whatever. Okay, he's like 5 years old. He's out playing. And he comes inside after a day and his mom says, hey, you hungry? Can I make you a sandwich? The kid says, sure, that would be nice. So the boy says, thank you. I'm really grateful for the sandwich. And the mom says, you're welcome. But you should know, all I did is buy the bread and make the sandwich. That's all I did. All right. So the boy goes to the grocery store and he finds the grocery. He says, listen, I want to thank you for making this delicious bread that my mom was able to turn a sandwich. And it was yummy. And I really appreciate it. The grocer says, you're welcome. But you should know, all I did was buy the flour from, I'm sorry, all I did was buy the bread from the bakery and then sold it to your mom. So it goes like this for what? He goes to the baker, he goes to the flour mill with the flour flying all everywhere, right? He goes out to the farm and the farmer's there working the field. And he says, listen, I want to thank you for planting this flour, this wheat rather, that is milled into flour, that gets baked into bread that got sold to my mother so I could have a delicious sandwich. And the farmer says, you're welcome. That is really sweet, like no one does this. And it's getting late in the day. Farmer says, look, all I did was I just planted and then the sun shines and the rain falls and it grows. So the boy's pretty frustrated. The farmer says, listen, come in and have dinner with me. So they sit down at the farmer's table. They bring out some wonderful steaming bread and they say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Right, praised are you, Lord our God, ruler of all, who brings forth bread from the earth. And now the boy knew who to praise and thank. Right? God is the ultimate cause of everything, but the proximate cause of nothing. Or we are living in partnership with God every day, and we sometimes don't even realize it. So this is what I want you to do for next time. Okay, I want you to do two things. Number one, I'd like you please to read Genesis 21, which is a story that we tell at the high holidays. You know, use it in your Tanakh, in your new JPS, or you can read it online. The second thing I'd like you to do is to practice saying hamotzi. When you have some bread, say hamotzi. Try to say it at least once a day. And do it with meaning, okay? Again, the danger of a tradition based on ritual, she needs to say hamotzi lechem min haaretz and then start eating, okay? The idea is to like really notice with gratitude. Thank you for this bread, to have a moment of real appreciation, and to say I'm grateful for the source of life that allows me to eat this bread. Like, you know, just that extra 5 seconds transforms the act from a meaningless ritual into a life-changing practice. The third thing, if you're interested in the Hebrew piece, I'll send a link with the Hebrew letters, spend a little bit of time just looking at the Hebrew letters and copying them over, and then I'll give you some materials next week to begin making progress. Okay, so this is what's going to happen. You will get a follow-up email. It will have in it the materials from today and a link to the class, and it will also have a link to the Hebrew alphabet stuff. And then next time when we meet, we'll look over the material from Genesis. We'll start talking about the high holidays, which will be the rest of our material for August and almost all of September. And then, like I said, we'll have an extra 15 minutes at the end for anybody who would like for Hebrew. So I'm delighted that you've made the time on an absolutely beautiful Sunday. I guess I don't know the conditions on the East Coast. It's gorgeous here. There's lots of other good choices of what you could be doing with your day. And I'm really grateful to be able to have the time to study and sit with all of you and get to know you and sort of exchange in this way. So I look forward to seeing you next week. And of course, feel welcome. We do have in-person Shabbat services and we're also streaming them. So feel very, very welcome at any time. Have a great day.
Thank you, Rabbi David.
Thank you, Rabbi Booth.
Thank you, Rabbi Booth.
Bye-bye. See you all next week.